Sonny looked at the terrified young girl and then laughed. His laughter sounded more than a little bit unhinged. His lady shuddered. Sonny waved a hand in the air.
No, Nide, I understand. I sound crazy.
The night sky above them was covered in an impregnable veil of clouds, and the one below them was empty and dark. The ancient stones they stood upon were slick with rainwater, and it was too dim to see anything except for vague silhouettes. The silhouette of the awakened hunter was towering, menacing, and embodied the very concept of terror. But Sonny didn't care that much. Massaging his chest, he smiled crookedly and said, his voice hoarse and raspy.
But then again, this whole world is insane. Someone told me once, I don't quite remember who, that we can only reflect what is in front of us. Is it my fault that there is nothing in front of me except for madness?
He looked down, his smile turning into a wicked grin.
And someone else once told me that they wanted to destroy the world. Back then I thought them insane, I think, but now I wonder.
The awakened hunter took a step forward, his monstrous voice permeating the darkness like an insidious murmur. Weak, so weak, his mind is broken. Sonny laughed again.
Yes, I am very, very weak, but I am not weak enough, I guess. Somehow I have a feeling that I wasn't supposed to be able to last that long. Who would be able to endure that much pain, that much horror, and that much suffering without losing their mind completely?
He glanced at his sword, then at the approaching enemy.
And yet I did, actually, while some of those nightmares, gods, how cruel they were, did hit a nerve overall. I am surprised to admit that. They really weren't that bad.
Sonny stared at the awakened hunter with a concerned expression, then scratched the back of his head.
Crazy, huh? It is almost as if after you have already been gutted once, nothing else can impress you that much. Or if you have already watched your mother die once, the second time won't be as, well, maybe it would. I don't know, I am a bit confused about what is real and what is not. Maybe I am myself not real. There's one thing I'm sure about, though.
The young girl slowly backed away from him, her face painted with fear. The awakened killer tilted his head a little, then asked with curiosity. Sonny shrugged.
Well, it's that, real or not, I am really, really hard to break, as it turns out, at least not to the point where I'll be unable to think and notice things. Oh, and I did notice a few things.
He slowly raised his sword and pointed it at the approaching hunter.
One thing I noticed is that my heart always seems ache, doesn't matter whether it's in a nightmare or in the real life. So that demands a question. If the heartache is the same, then maybe the nature of both the dream and the reality is the same as well.
He took a step forward, a confused expression on his face.
The second thing I noticed was that many of my thoughts, actions, and reactions don't really make sense. Sometimes my hands will try to do something on their own, and sometimes fragments of feelings, ideas, and judgments that I have to cause to possess will just appear on their own. Easy to explain in a dream, not so much in the waking world. And I am awake, am I, or am I not? Sometimes it's hard to say.
He laughed again and assumed a defensive position, waiting for the terrifying awakened hunter to attack.
Well, and the last thing I noticed were the radiant spheres of light I seem to be able to see inside the souls of living beings, or vile orbs of darkness in those of the corrupted. It took me a few nightmares to realize that those were soul cores. Strangely, once again, this ability pursued me from the nightmares into reality, making the two seem so much alike. So, with all that said, I am really only curious about one thing.
Sonny smiled, ready to meet his death once more.
You see, in my nightmares I met all kinds of creatures, awakened warriors, corrupted monsters, even transcendent immortals. Some of them had one soul core, some 2 or 3.
He lingered for a moment, and then looked past his enemy, at the mighty black steed standing motionless behind him, barely visible in the shadows.
So my question is, why does this damned horse always have 6?
With that, he dashed in the opposite direction from where the hunter's sword flashed, abandoning the young girl he was sworn to protect without a second thought. Sliding on the wet stones, Sonny dove under the flying blade and jumped to his feet, putting all of his weight into an attack of his own. However, his strike was not directed at the menacing killer. Instead, it was directed at the tenebrous steed. Unobstructed, the tip of the sword touched the mighty beast's onyx coat and shattered, as if striking adamantine stone instead of a living being. In the next moment, the awakened hunter's blade pierced him from behind, exiting out of Sonny's chest in a fountain of blood. Ignoring the terrible pain and the blood that was flowing from his mouth, Sonny grinned and looked at the motionless horse. The stallion looked at him back, his eyes dark and full of boundless, terrifying malevolence. A gargling laughter escaped from Sonny's lips.
Doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Kill me again, bastard. Kill me as many times as you want. In this nightmare, I am just a mundane swordsman, but in the next one, or the one after that, or the one after that, I'll be someone powerful enough to rip you to shreds, and then I will kill you again and again and again. Let's see which one of us is going to break first, you wretched pony.
The black steed looked down at Sonny, his eyes igniting with ghostly crimson flames. He snorted quietly and then opened his mouth, full of sharp teeth that were more like those of a wolf than that of a horse. And then the nightmare bit down on the trembling human's head, easily crushing it between his mighty jaws. Sonny died and woke up with a tortured scream. It was time to face a new day. He rolled out of the dingy tent he had been sleeping in and grinned, mad sparks igniting in his dark eyes. It was time to hunt an evil horse. That grin after waking up from getting your skull crushed is the kind of unhinged energy that keeps this story alive. If you are enjoying the ride, like this episode and subscribe for the next one. Now, back to the hunt. Sonny and the diabolical steed of the fallen Shadow Lord battled across an endless tapestry of nightmares. Both were possessed by an insatiable desire to destroy the other, burning with bloodlust fury and relentless killing intent. Their blood flowed across 100 harrowing dreams, dissolving into the crimson rivers that had been spilled in the kingdom of hope across the centuries. As the weaker of the two, it was Sonny who bled most of the time. But every time he was torn apart and killed, he made sure to at least leave a mark on the stallion's tenebrous black body. No matter how many times the damned horse killed Sonny, he had to share in the pain. Sonny was not only being hunted, no, he was a hunter himself. What did it matter how many deaths he experienced? What ghastly torments the nightmares held in store for him? In this realm of terrors, he was as immortal as the Stygian steed. Every time he died, he was reborn anew. And every time he was reborn, there was a chance of becoming someone, or something, that the infernal stallion would not be able to defeat. When that happened, their roles reversed, and it was the black horse that had to suffer, be broken, and die by his hand. Every kill filled Sonny's soul with jubilant, dark glee. He didn't care about dying over and over again, about witnessing atrocious horrors and experiencing the worst cruelty a person could imagine. He wasn't even sure that he was a person, after all. But no matter who or what he was, Sonny was content to endure as much agony as there was, as long as he could make the dark courser feel it too. Neither of them could die in the dream, so this battle was going to be decided by the tenacity of their wills. They were going to see whose spirit would break first. Sadly, the opportunities to really hurt the Shadow Steed were few and far between. Across all of the history of the Kingdom of Hope, there were not that many creatures that could challenge his vicious strength, and even less that Sonny was fortunate enough to inhabit in their darkest moment of despair. That was not to say that his hunt was without success. After giving in to madness and abandoning faith in the reality of the nightmares and of his own memories, Sonny was left with a gaping emptiness in place of where his identity was supposed to be. He knew very few things about who he really was and didn't really care to know more. It held no meaning for his goal of tormenting and killing the black horse over and over again. Nevertheless, a few constant things soon revealed themselves. His aching heart, his gift of gazing into the very souls of living beings, and his name. That was the only thing he managed to remember. Lost from Light, that was his name, and that was who he was. After Lost from Light managed to remember his name, it acted as an irresistible anchor that slowly pulled other things from the darkness of oblivion that shrouded his true self. Not actual memories, but far more useful things. Skills, fragments of knowledge, insights, patterns of thought. Just like a body had a memory of its own, a soul had one as well. Knowing one's name, the true name, was a key to unlocking it. So he wasn't completely helpless against the infernal steed. What's more, Lost from Light discovered that he had a strange aptitude for this harrowing dream battle of theirs, waking up in a new body after each death. Be it a man or a woman, a child or an elder, a human or a beast, a mundane creature or an awakened one that possessed unique and unexplainable powers. Would have been utterly confusing and debilitating for any warrior. How could one fight if they didn't know themselves? But his mind possessed a remarkable flexibility to it, an insidious ability to adapt to any circumstance almost in an instant, as though it was formless and shapeless by nature, and thus easily molded to fit any situation. Lost from Light found out that he could masterfully wield a large number of weapons regardless of whom he was reborn, as though he had fought in countless battles before. He was able to learn to wield any other by simply observing his enemies for a few moments. He could easily peer through their technique and intentions, and use that knowledge to destroy them. When he was reborn as a fearsome creature, he could almost instantly understand how to use his bestial body to rip the enemies to shreds, as though he had lived countless lives as countless monsters. But most importantly, he found out that fighting against those who were stronger than him was his second nature. Lost from Light's mind was full of treachery and cunning, which he could use to deliver terrible wounds to the fearsome stallion even when their might was vastly incomparable. And so, they hunted and killed each other through numerous nightmares, waiting to see which one would break first under the weight of hopelessness and never-ending suffering. Lost from Light wouldn't break, but the damned horse refused to break it too. The black steed was as resilient as he was, as stubborn, as willful, and as ruthless. It endured the endless stream of wounds and deaths Lost from Light delivered upon him with the same unbreakable determination, his hatred and murderous fury only growing stronger. The courser possessed an evil will and a devious mind of his own. He was ready to suffer terrible torment for eternity, too, as long as it meant destroying his enemy over and over again. Not caring about the agony, the stallion seemed darkly content to share it with his feral prey as well. The black steed was as mad as Lost from Light was. Neither of them gave up, no matter how many times they were mangled, mutilated, ripped apart, and killed. Neither of them broke. So, in the end, it was the never-ending nightmare that had to fracture and fall apart instead. Bloodied and crazed, Lost from Light dragged his body across a vast plain of weathered stone, his sword scraping on the black rocks. Behind him, the shattered remains of a warship were being consumed by fire, painting the darkness of the night with an angry orange glow. In front of him, some distance away, a beautiful black steed stood on shaky legs, red foam falling from his mouth. The eyes of the tenebrous beast shone with a dreadful crimson light, but behind the boundless fury and hate, a deep sense of exhaustion hid there, mixed with confusion, resentment, and pain. Lost from Light grinned.
What are you waiting for? Come here, come and take me, wretch."
The stallion breathed heavily, streams of searing steam escaping from his nostrils. He snorted with anger, then lunged forward, lowering his head to skewer the enemy with sharp horns. His steel hooves rang sonorously, causing swarms of red sparks to fly off the ancient stone, and his black mane waved in the wind like a stream of pure darkness. They clashed beneath the empty night sky. And then Lost from Light died, or so he thought. Instead of dissolving into darkness and being reborn into a new nightmare, he fell to the ground, causing the whole world to shudder.
"What is this? Am I finally done for?"
He thought that he saw strange tears appear in the very fabric of reality. And then reality crumbled like a vast black veil, everything around him. The stone island, the burning debris of the broken ship, even the lightless black sky, rippled and swayed as a silk curtain that was being crumbled by an invisible giant hand. A moment later, torn and broken, that curtain fell apart. It was a magnificent sight to see a whole world disintegrating right before your eyes. Some time later, Lost from Light found himself in a boundless darkness. Surrounded by pure nothingness, his pain was no more. In fact, He didn't even seem to possess a body. Instead, he had turned into a formless shadow with 3 orbs of black fire burning furiously in its depths. Lost from light laughed.
What happened? Don't tell me. Don't tell me that you ran out of nightmares, beast. Oh, what will you do now?
Instead of a response, something moved in front of him, behind him, all around him. Out there in the darkness, there was another shadow. But this one was deeper, vaster, and much more ancient. It was full of malevolence and hatred. As his voice echoed in the nothingness, the vast shadow suddenly surged forward, enveloping him. And then, lost from light, Sonny woke up. Sonny rolled out of the bed, clutching at his chest. His gauntlet scraped against the onyx metal of the mantle of the underworld, and in the next second, he fell onto the cold stone floor, looking around wildly, his eyes full of confusion and fear.
Where am I? It's another nightmare.
He saw a terrifying snake coiled in a corner, pale moonlight glistening on its Stygian scales, and a graceful knight in black armor standing guard at the door. For a moment, Sonny panicked, but then remembered who they were. And then he remembered who he was. His pupils widened.
I'm awake.
The fragmented memories of the countless nightmares drowned his mind, each one more harrowing than the other. Some of them were already fading away, like dreams usually did. But some remained almost as vivid and vibrant and terrible as when he had lived them. Sonny shuddered and let out a stifled shriek. For a few moments, his sense of self grew fragile, the madness of his nightmare self clashing against his actual being. But then, the real him. The one that was an awakened fighter instead of a nameless being locked inside a never-ending wheel of torturous nightmares. One over and absorbed the other. Somehow, it was a proper mess. But Sonny had no time to pay a lot of attention to the chaotic, and without a doubt, dire process of his different divergent selves melding together. Because as soon as he fell to the floor, he heard the painfully familiar sound. Loud, threatening, drawing closer and closer. The ringing of steel hooves on cold stone.
How and what?
He was too disoriented and shell-shocked to gather his thoughts and understand what was happening. He knew only one thing for sure. The damned horse was coming. Saint suddenly raised her shield and stared at the door, while the soul serpent silently blended with the shadows. Sonny was already trying to stand up, a desperate thought trying to form in his mind.
Memory, I need to summon a memory. I need a weapon.
But he didn't get a chance to. Just a moment later, the wall of the chamber suddenly exploded into a flood of stone shrapnel, and 2 furious crimson eyes appeared in the darkness behind it. The Black Stallion, the awakened terror that had once been Shadow Lord's steed and companion, galloped into the chamber right through the stone wall and rammed into Sonny without slowing down one bit. In the short moment before that happened, Sonny got a chance to get a good look at him. The creature appeared exactly as it had in the nightmares. The stallion was tall and graceful, his coat as black as night, and his eyes burning with menacing crimson light. Lean muscles rolled under his skin with each movement, making it glisten with dark luster. His hooves seemed to be forged out of somber adamantine metal, as were his curved horns and sharp, terrifying fangs. The tenebrous steed seemed to be surrounded by shadows, his silhouette cloaked in their dark mantle. He was as beautiful as he was terrifying. More importantly, the terror was heading right for Sonny, with cold hatred burning in his dreadful eyes. A split second later, the stallion rammed him at full speed. The black horns failed to pierce the stone-like metal of the mantle of the underworld, but Sonny felt as though he was hit by a speeding train. His armored body was raised into the air and flung backward. The courser carried him forward on the sharp horns, and a moment later rammed into the other wall of the room, shattering it with Sonny's back. Sonny felt another terrifying impact, and his vision momentarily went black. Surrounded by a cloud of stone debris, the two of them, the demon and the terror, fell out of the jagged breach in the keep's outer wall and into the cool night air, plummeting down from the height of the abandoned castle's main tower.
Damned horse, why can't you just die?
Sunny and the black steed plummeted down in a cloud of shattered stone. Far below them, the courtyard of the boundary fortress lay, shrouded in darkness. It was growing closer and closer, approaching with terrifying speed. Neither paid it any attention, however. The stallion bit down on Sunny's shoulder with all his might, his sharp fangs scraping against the stone-like metal of the mantle of the underworld. The fearsome onyx armor was an ascended memory of the 6th tier, a whole rank above the diabolical shadow, so the courser was not supposed to be able to damage it. However, to Sunny's shock and dismay, the metal plates actually groaned and bent, crushing his flesh. He roared with pain and anger, then thrust his 4 hands forward, ripping the terror's chest with his claws. Drops of blood fell down like rain. Intertwined, the 2 of them hit the cobblestones of the desolate courtyard. However, instead of being broken by the fall, both simply submerged into the veil of shadows, drowning it, as if the ancient stones had turned into a lake of liquid darkness. For a moment, Sunny found himself floating in the tenebrous embrace of deep, unfathomable shadows. Usually, turning into a ghostly shade would have meant escaping to safety. But today, his enemy was a similar creature himself. A vast and terrifying presence lunged at him from the darkness, full of fury and boundless, chilling, killing intent. The black steed had pursued him even into the shadows. However, this time, Sunny was ready. He had never fought anyone or anything as a shadow, but he had been attacked in this form twice, first by the mirror beast, and then by its insidious creator, Mordred of Valor, the Prince of Nothing. Both were able to steal his own ability and use it against him. What did it mean? It meant that while Sunny could not damage mundane shadows, as Shadow Blade Kurt had been able to, he was capable of destroying other shadow creatures, just like they were capable of destroying him. In his shadow state, Sunny was shapeless and formless, but that also meant that he could assume any shape and any form. It was just a matter of his will, mind, and imagination. As the vast presence that was the nightmare steed lunged at him, he moved to meet it, turning into a long, narrow blade made of darkness. They clashed, tearing each other's souls apart. Sunny's whole being was instantly drowned by terrible suffering, but he also felt a silent scream of agony escaping from the rippling shadow that was trying to enshroud him. Both the demon and the terror were thrown back into the corporeal world, Sunny rolling away on the cold stones, the tenebrous steed sliding on them as his hooves struck sparks into the air.
"Kill, I'm gonna kill you, bastard. Just you wait."
Sunny roared and rose to his feet, outstretching one hand to summon the cruel sight and another to summon the moonlight shard. 2 burning crimson eyes streaked through the darkness, and he was hit in the chest again. His lower hands grabbed the horns of the infernal stallion, and the mantle of the underworld suddenly grew as heavy as a mountain. That didn't slow down the courser one bit, however. Together, they struck the wall of the dilapidated fortress. Sunny shrieked, feeling his spine come very close to snapping. If not for bone weave, he would have undoubtedly been shattered into pieces. Instead, the wall of the fortress was shattered instead. A whole section of it cracked and then crumbled, making the ground tremble as a vast cloud of dust rose into the air and blotted out the stars. The damned terror carried him through the cloud, emerging from the other side of it a split second later, and then threw Sunny to the ground, trying to impale him with the horns. But his enemy never let go of them, so instead, the 4-armored demon was dragged across the emerald grass, tearing the soil apart. One of his hands flashed forward, piercing one of the stallion's eyes with a ghostly stiletto, or at least trying to. At the last moment, the black horse snapped its head sideways and bit down on the blade of the moonlight shard with his fangs, then jerked his neck and sent Sunny flying through the air.
Damnation.
Sunny spun in the air and landed on his feet, sliding back a dozen meters as the soles of his armored boots tore the ground. A moment later, he grasped the shaft of the cruel sight from the air and raised the somber spear ready to strike the enemy. But the black steed had somehow disappeared and was nowhere in sight. His vertical pupils narrowed, and then Sunny spun, sensing a swift and vast shadow circling him from behind. The blade of the cruel sight suddenly shone with pure light, tearing the darkness apart. The nightmarish courser was forced back into the corporeal form and instantly came under attack. The tip of the spear bit deep into his shoulder, causing more blood to fall on the grass. Uncaring, the terror twisted and shifted his weight, standing on his front legs as both hind ones were thrown into the air, drawn like powerful springs. Sonny shivered.
Craw.
In the next moment, the black horse struck backward with both legs, catching him square in the chest. The breastplate of the mantle of the underworld rang mournfully as a thin net of cracks appeared on it. Stunned and blinded, Sonny was sent backward, flying above the ground with terrible speed. He collided against an ancient tree and went right through it, the thick trunk exploding into a cloud of splinters. Then he hit the ground and bounced from it, flew some more. Then crashed down again and rolled for dozens of meters, blood shooting out of his mouth.
Hurt and that hurt.
His heart hurt too. It hurt way too much. Gulping for air and unable to force it into his 4 lungs, Sonny shakily rose to his feet and stubbornly raised the cruel sight. And then the black steed shot from the darkness and rammed into him again. This time, both of them slid off the edge of the island. Sonny and the Stygian courser continued their battle in the darkness of the sky below, then fell on the swaying surface of a heavenly chain. Turning into swift shadows, they clashed again and again as they glided across its length with terrible speed, ripping each other's souls to shreds. Traversing many kilometers in a matter of a dozen heartbeats, they emerged from the shadows and shot upward, then crashed on the surface of the next island, wrecking and destroying anything that appeared in their way. The courser rammed Sonny again and again, carrying him further and further away through the night, not giving Saint and the Soul Serpent any chance to catch up. The stallion used his devastating hooves, his adamantine horns, and his sharp fangs. Anything he had to deliver as much pain and damage to the wicked, tenacious, hateful enemy of his. But Sonny was consumed with the same murderous fury. He returned the favor with his weapons, his claws, and his own fangs and horns as well, forgetting everything except for the crazed desire to obliterate his foe. They rolled across the unfamiliar island like a wave of destruction and flew high into the sky. Sonny with the help of the dark wing and the heavenly burden, the terror with the help of nothing but the force of his hind legs and the terrifying range of his dashing jump. His fangs caught the fragile fabric of the transparent cloak, tearing it apart, and then both of them plummeted down once more, landing on another chain and instantly submerging into shadows. Just like that, they fought without stop, overwhelmed by the maddening desire to destroy the enemy. When they clashed in their corporeal forms, Sonny was always on the losing side, receiving more wounds and being thrown around like a tattered rag doll. However, when they became shadows, he held the advantage. Despite the fact that the black steed was 3 whole classes ahead of him, they were of the same rank. And while the courser was a more ancient and powerful shadow, Sonny was a divine one, suffused with the flame of divinity. Each of his attacks dealt more damage, and that damage was far more terrible as well. His shadow form, while much smaller, was far more fathomless and resilient. Held together by the bond of a true name, his soul was much harder to destroy. They fought and fought and fought, flying through the night as their bodies became broken and bloodied, and their souls became tattered and torn. And yet, neither was willing to give up. Neither was willing to let the enemy live. Sonny had never experienced a battle that was so ferocious, swift, and devastating. Everything happened too fast and hurt too much for him to properly perceive and comprehend. At some point, he stopped trying to, giving in entirely to his intuition and battle instinct. There was only one truth and one unbreakable law after all. He had to kill the enemy and prevent the enemy from killing him. Everything else was just noise. Finally, exhausted and covered in wounds, they reached a deserted island where nothing living dwelled or grew. Rolling on the ground, Sonny used 2 shadows to augment his mangled body, and the third one to serve as his second pair of eyes. Deep in the battle trance of clarity, he was able to perceive the whole world as one interconnected picture, with each part of it existing within the same complicated pattern as all the rest. His mind was forged into a single sharp edge. All of his thought dedicated to the battle, clear, purposeful, and swift. He saw the silhouette of the infernal black horse approach him from the darkness, bloody foam streaming from the stallion's mouth, unshaken while burning in the dreadful crimson eyes. By now, the two of them knew each other better than they knew themselves. After all, they had spent countless nightmares hunting and killing each other, only to continue the battle in reality after the nightmares could not keep up anymore. They were evenly matched. The black steed was far more powerful and had experienced centuries of bloody battles, but Sunny was devious, cunning, and full of insidious treachery that made up for his lack of strength. Neither could overwhelm the other, and at this point, both were probably going to die trying. The steed seemed to be at peace with such an outcome. And Sunny was too. He would have preferred to stay alive, though.
"I'm curse you."
A low growl escaped from his lips, and then Sunny suddenly dismissed his weapons, and even his armor, standing motionlessly under the starlit sky, his nakedness covered only by a crude loincloth. Raising one hand, he massaged his aching chest, then bared his fangs in a dark grin and growled.
"Let us end this, then."
The black steed stared at the hateful enemy for a few moments, and then lowered his head, starlight shining on the sharp tips of his horns. And then the courser charged forward, breaking the ground with the push of his adamantine hooves. Sunny lunged forward as well. He had only one gamble left, one desperate, devious trick. Since he and the tenebrous stallion knew each other so well, he was going to try and turn into the terror's shadow. Using shadow dance against another shadow was a strange concept, since shadows were formless and shapeless by nature. How was he supposed to peer into the very essence of something that was shifting and ever-changing? Well, he was either going to do it somehow or die. That was why Sunny had dismissed his armor and his weapons. The black stallion did not use any weapons or armor after all. Only his hooves, his fangs, his horns, his unbreakable will, and his furious desire to kill. That was what Sunny had to use too. He recalled everything he could about the endless stream of nightmares. Every torturous death, every indescribable torment, every excruciating loss he still remembered. And how his enemy had been in those vile dreams. He remembered a similar deserted island centuries ago where the Shadow Lord said his last goodbye to his faithful steed, and their exhilarating ride across the night skies just before that. He remembered every wound that the stallion had dealt him, and every wound that he had dealt in return. And then, he tried to use shadow dance like he had used it on countless humans and creatures before, only this time, peering even deeper. Wishing to understand even more. For a moment, it was as though Sunny himself became the Stygian steed. He felt it. The rage, the hatred, the dark resolve, but also deep underneath it, boundless loneliness, sorrow, and longing. Ah, what a terrible fate it was for a shadow to walk the world without its master. He saw himself wandering across the ruins of the Kingdom of Hope, mournful and lost, and then returning to the now empty fortress that had once been his home, his master's home, only to see it be overtaken and desecrated by marauding strangers. He felt a deeply maddening rage and gave in to this madness, letting it consume him. And then, Sunny saw himself charging at a bloodied form of a four-armed demon. He saw clearly what the black steed was going to do to kill him. A split second before it happened. And so, he sidestepped the attack before it even came, raised his upper arms, locked his fists together, and brought them down with all the devastating, inhuman power he had. The charge of the stallion missed, and instead, a terrible blow descended from above, landing on his spine and shattering it. The black steed tumbled to the ground, suddenly paralyzed, and remained laying there, his side rising and falling shakily, his horse breathing, slowing down and down. Sunny fell too.
Zon hell.
It felt like he was dying too. The pain in his chest had finally grown intolerable, as if his heart finally reached its limit. Turning his head, he stared at the dying horse, whose dreadful crimson eyes were slowly growing dim and cold. After a while, the madness burning in them was extinguished, and a shadow of a new emotion appeared in them: confusion, pain, and sudden recognition. The black steed breathed in one last time, then let out a quiet whine, and died. Sunny closed his eyes. He was so tired. I won. Well, then maybe it was time for him to die too. In the darkness, the voice of the spell whispered into his ear, its voice soft and solemn.
You have slain an awakened shadow nightmare. Your shadow grows stronger.
He felt a vast amount of shadow fragments flow into his cores, reinforcing them, and thought tiredly. Strange, that doesn't feel like just 6 of them. But the spell was not done speaking. It remained silent for a moment, and then said,
You have received a shadow. Your aspect legacy mastery level has increased. You have received the right to claim a legacy relic.
Sunny weakly tried to smile. Such great news. This would have been great if I was not dying. And then a strange sound invaded his ears. It sounded like the rustle of sails. There was warmth, sunlight, and the smell of fresh sheets, wood, and green leaves. Sunny slowly opened his eyes and felt the bed beneath him sway gently. No, the world itself had swayed. It was time to face a new day. Suddenly overwhelmed by terror, he sat up with a growl, his eyes wildly searching for the signs of danger, disaster, and death. His 4 hands rose, sharp claws ready to tear flesh apart.
No, no, no. It was all a dream. I'm in the nightmare again. I never escaped.
Panic washed over his mind, but the slowly receded. Sunny remained motionless for a few moments, then lowered his gaze and stared at his 4 hands. 4. This was the shadow demon's body. He was awake. He was himself. Well, the nightmare version of himself. It was all so convoluted. He remembered the desolate fortress, the endless torments he had dreamt of, the fearsome battle with the black steed, and his eventual victory, the terrible pain of his last heart giving out. Tootum tootump, tootum tootump, tootum tootump. Hearing the strange sound, Sunny looked at his chest. His 3 shadows were sprawled on the ground, so the rough skin of the shadow demon had lost its obsidian color and was back to its original complexion. As pale and gray as it had been back when he first entered the nightmare. There was a thin, barely noticeable scar running vertically from his collarbone to his abdomen, and beneath it, tootum-too-tump. 2 mighty hearts were beating steadily, circulating rivers of blood through the gaunt, towering body of the 4-armed demon. He blinked a couple of times.
I am's alive.
Not only was he alive, but he also seemed to possess 2 perfectly healthy hearts. Remembering something, Sunny shifted his gaze back to his hands and noticed that his 2 missing fingers were now back, be it of a slightly different color and seemingly carved out of ashen, polished wood. He tentatively made his hands into fists and saw the wooden fingers bend as if they were no different from the other 18. He could even feel the texture of the skin on his palms pressing against their tips. His 2 new claws were forged out of lusterless steel. Finally, Sunny raised his eyes and looked around, trying to understand where he was. The room he saw was not very spacious, but also not small. Its walls and ceiling were made out of wood, and so was the floor, hidden under an opulent plush rug. The bed he lay upon was sturdy and large, with a mattress so soft that it seemed like a cloud and pristine white sheets covering it. There were several pieces of luxurious furniture in the room. A pile of bright sitting pillows on the floor, a tray with succulent fruit on an intricate wooden table, and a large window on one of the walls, opening onto a breathtaking view of the boundless blue sky. Despite the lavish decor, the room felt familiar somehow. Sunny frowned.
Wait a minute.
Wasn't there a room just like this, but far more dilapidated and empty, on the ancient flying ship the fire keepers had repaired? Suddenly, something clicked in his mind, and his vertical pupils narrowed.
Noctis of that lying crook.
Sunny was back on board the magnificent sky vessel that had a beautiful tree growing around its mast. Only that vessel had not been shattered and wrecked, then recovered and restored by Cassie's cohort yet. It was still owned by its original captain, the great and powerful sorcerer of the East, Noctis. He must have picked Sunny up after the battle with the black steed and kept his promise, fashioning a new heart for the shadow demon's body, and even replacing the fingers Sunny had lost while trying to learn how to weave, which was very nice of him, but didn't mean that Sunny would not still enjoy ripping the bastard limb from limb.
That lying sack of monster crap, spend the night in the fortress, sunless. What's the worst that could happen sunless? I'm going to strangle him.
Sonny growled hatefully and clenched his fists, almost slicing his own skin apart with the claws. He was full of resentment, fury, and vengeful wrath. However, after thinking about it for a few moments, he had to hide his fangs and make a sour face. Yes, the thought of making the deceitful sorcerer squirm felt very nice, but no matter how weak and affable Noctis seemed, he was an immortal transcended, a chain lord of the kingdom of hope, someone whose mere presence was enough to scare a terrifying, corrupted monster away. There were far more productive things in life than harboring thoughts of revenge against someone like that. Besides, there was so much Sonny had to think about instead. The nightmares, the battle with the Shadow Stallion, the rewards he had received after emerging victorious from it, his future plans and actions. Sadly, he did not receive an opportunity to consider all these important and vital things. As if summoned by Sonny thinking of his name, the damned sorcerer suddenly opened the door and entered the room, whistling a jolly tune under his nose. Noctis was just as Sonny remembered him, carefree, pleasantly likable, and dressed in extravagantly colorful silk garments. His raven-black hair was immaculate and lustrous, and his beautiful gray eyes sparkled with jovial light. Noctis saw the four-armed demon and smiled brightly.
Sunless, you're finally awake.
Sonny stared at him, the corner of his eyes twitching. Bastard, you have the audacity to smile at me after sending me to that hell. He hesitated, then let out a low growl as a greeting. Come to think of it, what exactly was the sorcerer planning to do with him now? A vague memory of one of the nightmares suddenly entered his mind, one where he had been turned into an obedient wooden doll who had it been? Sonny suddenly shivered. Noctis continued to smile, and then said in a strange voice,
Well then, since you're up, why don't you come with me, Sunless?
Sonny gulped. Somehow, he felt that this invitation was not really something he could refuse. Thinking that it was unwise to refuse the immortal sorcerer, Sonny rose from the bed and hesitated for a moment, noticing that he was completely naked. Numerous wounds that he had received in the Red Colosseum and later in the battle with the Black Steed had turned his gray skin into a map of scars, with lean muscles rolling under it like mountain chains. Noctis gave him a funny look, then cleared his throat and pointed to a chair that had a black kimono hanging on its backrest. The garment was made out of silk, intricately stitched, and fit his towering figure perfectly. It even had 4 sleeves instead of 2, revealing that someone must have sewn the thing specifically for him. Feeling the cool caress of the soft fabric on his rough skin, Sonny covered his nakedness, fastened the belt around his waist, and then put on a pair of leather sandals, feeling somewhat like a proper human again, or rather, a proper demon. He then tied his wild black hair with a black ribbon and followed Noctis out of the room. As they walked to the upper deck, the sorcerer couldn't help but throw glances at him, mumbling some nonsense in a barely audible voice.
Wonderful, marvelous. My complexion is without a doubt the fairest there is in the kingdom of hope here, but alas, black doesn't suit me at all. I won't be caught dead wearing black, or alive, really. But this is just perfect. Finally, someone to do justice to this night silk I bought. It must be fate indeed, no doubt about it.
Sonny stared at the immortal transcendent with a concerned scowl on his face. The man was clearly a raving lunatic. Another one.
Why the hell is everyone in this damned nightmare insane?
They walked onto the upper deck of the flying ship, where Sonny saw a somewhat familiar picture. There was a beautiful tree growing around the main mast, with the middle of the vessel drowning in the cool shade of its wide branches. The bark of the tree was ivory white, and its leaves were vibrant emerald in color. The difference with how the flying ship had been in the future was that the original tree he was staring at right now was much taller, stronger, more robust, ancient. Now that he had witnessed the consecrated grove of Heart God, Sonny easily recognized its origin. He also shuddered, remembering the nightmare in which he was reborn as an old man. That one was perhaps the most terrible of them all, mostly because it reminded him of his own past, his own mother, his own loss. Noticing a subtle shift in the expression of the sullen demon and misunderstanding it, Noctis smiled proudly.
Ah yes, she's a real beauty. This noble ship is the last of her kind. An original. All those flying buckets the rest of them use are just crude imitations.
He patted the bark of the sacred tree in passing and continued forward, heading for the bow of the ship.
You are probably too young to remember Sunless, but a long time ago the sky below was full of divine flame. Back then, there were fearless daredevils who dove down into the ocean of immolating fire to harvest some of it. This is the last remaining vessel of their fleet.
The sorcerer smiled.
All the rest were turned to ash along with their crews. Even the memory of them is long gone. Shame. Those guys were really something, the fire hunters, a fun crowd. Not very bright, though, which was how I got my hands on this beauty, won her in a game of cards and made some improvements.
He laughed.
I am the best player in all of the Kingdom of Hope, you know. I even won that obsidian knife you carry once from the one in the north. Oh, you should have seen her face when she had to give me the prize. That was back when she cared about such stuff, of course.
Sunny blinked and stared at the sorcerer, dumbfounded.
No way. He won one of the 7 knives playing cards. The 7 knives created by Sun God.
Noctis glanced at him and winked.
Ah yes, the rest of the lords had the exact same expression you do right now. They were very angry with us too. It was a giant mess. I sort of lost that knife later on though, so they mellowed out.
He grew silent for a bit, and then added, his voice a little darker.
But these knives, they never really stay lost for long, you know. It's really hard to get rid of one. Impossible, in fact.
They continued forward in silence. Disturbed, Sunny turned away and looked over the railing of the flying ship. It seemed that Noctis had not moved the vessel away from the deserted island where the battle between Sunny and the Black Stallion had ended. It was still below, empty except for a few jagged rocks laying here and there. The only difference was that, now, there were beautiful white flowers growing from the soil where the drops of the lonesome steed's blood had fallen on it.
A giant mess.
Sunny knew that there were 7 immortals created by the Lord of Light to guard, or rather, contain, hope. Their strings were torn out of the tapestry of fate, made to loop endlessly onto themselves and placed into 7 strange knives. And so, the knives were both what made the Chain Lords eternal and the only thing that could kill them. Each of Hope's wardens was entrusted with the key to another's death. This was what kept the balance between them. So, of course, Noctis had made a huge mess by managing to get his hands on a second one. No wonder the other lords were angry. Even though losing one of the knives was something only a complete idiot would do in this instance, the sorcerer had been lucky to somehow manage such a feat. Otherwise, he might have found himself in hot water or molten steel. Sunny shuddered and closed his eyes for a moment. Finally, they reached the bow of the ship and descended a set of stairs, eventually stopping in front of a heavily reinforced door that looked faintly familiar. Noctis unlocked the door and invited Sunny inside. There Sunny saw armored walls, a high ceiling, and 3 chests standing in the center of the room. Staring at one of them in particular, he suddenly paled terribly and took an involuntary step back. Noctis glanced at him with confusion, then shook his head.
You are very strange. Don't be afraid. These are just my treasure chests. They won't bite.
He thought for a second, and then gave one of the chests a playful kick.
Well, except for this one will eat you alive.
Sunny stared at the painfully familiar chest, his black eyes full of fright and venomous resentment. Of course, he had recognized it instantly. It was his old nemesis, the mordant mimic, the vile creature that had almost eaten him alive once in the distant future. Granted, he had ended up being the one to feast on the flesh of the abomination instead, which had been a traumatic experience in and of itself. But who was to say that he would be able to kill the fallen devil again? Sure. Sunny was much stronger and more experienced now. He had more cores, thousands more shadow fragments reinforcing them, much better equipment, and inhabited the body of an actual demon. But there was also no crushing in this era to help him hold the creature down while the broken oath did its job. Thankfully, the bastard seemed to be behaving itself, maybe out of fear of its master, actually. Sunny looked closer and frowned, noticing that the chest had only 3 soul cores, none showing any sign of corruption. They were bright and pristine, just like that of any other creature following the path of ascension. However, they were also too dim to be of the ascended rank. The mimic was neither fallen nor a devil yet. It was simply an awakened demon masquerading as a treasure chest, which was a bit of an improvement, but still didn't really explain why Noctis was using a powerful demon as a piece of furniture.
I guess the mimic grew stronger sometime in the future and was also corrupted somehow.
Sunny relaxed a little, but then his scowl deepened. While Noctis opened one of the other 2 chests and started enthusiastically rummaging through it, 2 thoughts entered Sunny's mind. One was very simple.
Coins.
However, no matter how alluring the image of the miraculous coins was, the second thought took precedence.
What the hell?
Those words Noctis had just said, weren't they mentioned in the description of the covetous coffer? Yes, they were. So Sunny was and had always been the pale friend mentioned in it. How could the spell have known that this exact scene would play out all that time ago? Back then, Sunny had not even known about the existence of the nightmare seed in the ivory tower, let alone harbored any thoughts of entering it. There were 2 possible answers, both of them equally unnerving. One was that the nightmare was not, in fact, a recreation of the past. Instead, it was just the past. The spell knew what Noctis was going to say because this conversation had already happened thousands of years ago, and possessed the power to send people back through time. Sunny wasn't quite ready to believe that, though. Things didn't really add up. If each nightmare allowed Awakened to travel through time and return to the past, they would have been able to cause changes in the present through their actions. There had not been too many nightmares conquered since the spell had appeared, but also not that few. Hundreds at least, and maybe even thousands. So he was more inclined to consider the other answer. The second answer had to do with the nature of the spell and the domain of its alleged creator. Weaver was called the Demon of Fate for a reason after all. Their mask allowed Sunny to steal a glance at the tapestry of fate and see the past, the present, and the future of everything all at the same time. Just one split second of this terrible knowledge had almost driven him insane. Perhaps the spell, which was woven out of those very strings of fate, was able to perceive the depths of the tapestry as well, and hence knew that it was Sunny's fate to enter the nightmare meet Noctis, and have this conversation in the treasury of the flying ship. That possibility was, perhaps, even more frightening.
Damnation, my head hurts.
The mystery of the seemingly innocuous description of the covetous coffer had turned out to hold a key to a very important piece of the grand puzzle, one that was too important to be considered hastily. The whole nature of the world as Sunny knew it could be changed entirely depending on which answer was true. He was going to have to think about it more and later in excruciating detail. And speaking of excruciating, Sunny lingered, then glanced at Noctis, suddenly remembering all the torment he had gone through because of that shameless crook. He gritted his teeth, thinking of all the ways he would have made the bastard pay if he could. The crook in question, meanwhile, smiled widely as he pulled a sparkling emerald medallion out of the chest and threw it to Sunny.
Aha, there you are here, catch.
Sunny caught the medallion and studied it with a dubious expression. There seemed to be an almost invisible, intricate string of runes carved into the precious stone.
What is this crook planning now, I wonder? I wish I could rip his flimsy body into tiny pieces and listen to him scream. I would have started with the fingers, I think, and worked my way up, one little piece at a time.
Noctis stared at him with a strange expression, his face frozen. Sunny frowned.
Why is that idiot staring at me? gods, what a lunatic. Huh, wait a moment.
He blinked.
Why does it sound as if I'm speaking aloud? Damn, am I going crazy as well? Crazier, I mean.
The sorcerer cleared his throat, then cautiously hid his hands behind his back.
Yeah, that emerald trinket you are holding is a very rare and precious magical amulet. It can project someone's thoughts outward and vocalize them, turning thought into sound, so do stay away from my fingers, please. I am quite attached to them, unlike some people.
Sunny paled.
What? No, he heard all that. Wait, crap, he heard that too.
He shuddered and hurriedly dropped the emerald amulet to the floor, then stared at it in abject horror. Noctis smiled.
Oh, Sunless, don't fret, my friend. I know it was just a bit of friendly teasing. I've heard way worse anyway. You are actually a very restrained individual as far as demons go.
He bent down, picked up the amulet, and offered it to Sunny with an innocent grin.
So how about we have a hearty meal and talk? There's so much we must speak about.
A few minutes later, Sunny was staring at a table full of all kinds of delicious food. The table was situated on the upper deck of the flying ship, allowing for a breathtaking view of the shattered kingdom of hope below. Being that high up in the sky, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of discomfort. The fear of the crushing was already deeply ingrained into his bones. However, the terrible curse that dictated the lives of everyone on the chained isles did not exist yet. He had nothing to worry about, or rather, he did not have to worry about that particular danger. There were plenty of other existential threats surrounding him, however. The food had been served by obedient wooden dolls wearing tasteful silk liveries. Sunny was pretty sure that each of the animated mannequins had been a living creature once, their souls torn from their bodies and placed into the dolls by the person sitting across from him, taking a sip of a cooled wine. The person in question smiled brilliantly and gestured at the food.
Come, Sunless, enjoy.
Sunny hesitated for a bit, then reached out to put a few portions of several mouth-watering dishes onto his plate. He was careful not to touch the emerald amulet that lay in front of him, knowing that doing so would reveal all his thoughts to the damned sorcerer. That thing was maybe the greatest danger he faced. While the ability to communicate with people was something he had been thinking about from the first day of entering the nightmare, sharing his every thought was not something Sunny was ready to deal with yet. His flaw had been constraining what he was able to say for a long time now, so his mind was a kind of safe haven for Sunny. For that reason, he had developed a tendency to run wild with his thoughts. Revealing them all to a mad sorcerer was not a very great idea. Noctis watched him eat with a carefree smile, then said in a friendly tone,
By the way, great job killing that nasty horse. What a feat. What a gallant deed. Truly, vanquishing it was an exploit worthy of being sung about. But Sunless.
The sorcerer hesitated for a moment, then leaned forward and asked with a bit of exasperated desperation in his voice,
Please tell me why for the love of the gods did you kill the horse?
Sunny, who was taking a sip of cold water, spat it all out. Coughing, he stared at Noctis with murderous fury burning in his bestial black eyes, then ground his fangs and put his palm on the emerald amulet.
What the hell do you mean? Why did I kill the horse? You were the one who sent me into his damned lair. The horse was this close to becoming the end of me. What else was I supposed to do?
Then he clenched his 4 fists and growled.
The nerve of this bastard.
Sunny, of course, meant for that last thought to remain unsaid, but sadly, one of his fists was still touching the enchanted amulet. Noctis looked at him, blinked a few times, and then flung his hands into the air.
I never meant for you to fight it. Do I look like an idiot? That horse destroyed hundreds of creatures much scarier than you. Why would I send a mere demon to battle it?
Sunny opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Finally, he hissed.
Yes, I don't know. Why did you send me into the fortress?
The sorcerer gulped down his of wine, remained silent for a bit, then let out a bitter sigh.
Oh well, I just thought that since you are both shadow creatures, it might have liked you. Didn't you know each other back when your master was still around?
Sunny looked at the beautiful immortal for a few moments, then trembled slightly and covered his face with 2 hands.
That damn fool.
This time, he was careful to not touch the amulet while thinking that. The worst part of all of it was that Noctis was not entirely unfounded in thinking that the black steed would not attack Sunny. The body he was currently inhabiting had, indeed, been acquainted with the stallion centuries ago, back when their lord had been alive. The problem was that Sunny had replaced the 4-armed demon, and thus had no memory of knowing the black courser. While the courser himself had gone mad during the hundreds of years of solitude and only recognized his old companion seconds before death, when his madness receded for a few short moments. So, all that horror, all the pain and torment he had gone through in the nightmares, was the result of a tragic and cruel twist of fate. It was just a series of wicked and disastrous coincidences, nothing more and nothing less. Sunny let out a low growl. Forget it. It doesn't matter anyway. Not now and not anymore. The important part is, Noctis might look like an eccentric idiot, but he is anything but. If he wanted me to reunite with Shadow Lord Steed, there was a reason for that. What does he really want? He hesitated, then placed his hand back onto the amulet.
Why did you want me to meet that thing?
The sorcerer remained silent for a bit, then smiled charmingly.
Oh right, by any chance, before you killed it, has Nightmare shared anything with you, the location of a certain glass knife, for example?
Sunny snorted.
So that's what all of this is about.
He took a bite out of a loaf of delicious, freshly baked bread, chewed it unhurriedly, thinking about nothing at all, and then responded in a calm tone.
Sure, there is something that I learned. Why?
Noctis cleared his throat, glanced at the scenery, then back at Sunny. Finally, he said with a bit of visibly forced indifference.
Oh, well, would you mind sharing?
Sunny stared at him for a bit, then grinned. With his bestial face and 2 rows of sharp fangs, that grin looked truly frightening.
Would I mind? That depends. Why do you want that knife?
Noctis smiled with his usual carefree attitude, then waved his hand dismissively.
It's nothing much, a small thing, really. You see, I just want to gather the knives, start a war against both the Ivory City and the Red Colosseum, kill all of the Chain Lords, defy the Lord of Light, break the will of gods, and release the demon of desire out of her prison. And then maybe have a cup of tea.
The sorcerer grew silent for a moment, and then added thoughtfully.
Actually, on second thought, maybe I'll have the tea first.
Sunny stared at the immortal sorcerer, stunned by those words. The scale and scope of the bloodshed and adversity Noctis was striving for were simply beyond comprehension. And yet, he had confessed this terrible desire with the same carefree, nonchalant, jovial attitude, as though he was indeed talking about brewing tea instead of waging war on 4 deathless saints and their armies. Sunny remembered the first time he saw Noctis, bloodied, crestfallen, sitting motionlessly in front of the fire with a diamond sickle laying at his feet, its blade marred with crimson. A grim and somber thought formed in his mind all by itself. Sunny breathed, "Insane! You are insane! All of you are." He flinched, then removed his trembling hand from the emerald amulet. Noctis threw his head back and laughed, as if he heard the funniest joke in the world. The silent sailor dolls stood around him, motionless, staring into emptiness with their crudely carved eyes. The scene that was strange and fantastical a few moments ago suddenly seemed threatening and eerie. After a while, the sorcerer grew quiet, then glanced at Sunny with a mischievous smile and asked,
Yes, indeed, I could not have said it better myself. All of us are insane, but don't you get it yet, Sunless? Don't you understand why?
Sunny frowned, then shook his head. Sunny muttered, "What the hell is he trying to say?" How was he supposed to know why everyone in this damned nightmare seemed completely mad? And then something moved in his mind, a seed of a thought, a nascent hint of understanding. His pupils narrowed slightly. There was something strange about the Kingdom of Hope. He had first sensed it after escaping the Red Colosseum and facing Solving, that beautiful and utterly demented fiend. Her actions made a perverse and yet perfect sense. But there was still something wrong about her. Back then, he had felt a vague suspicion. Something seemed out of place. Something didn't make sense. And after, when he had been thrust into the never-ending nightmares, this feeling only grew stronger. He just had no time to think about it. Everyone here seemed slightly, or greatly, off. Every emotion was sharper and cut deeper. Every vice or virtue grew out of control until it turned into a destructive obsession. He had experienced it all, lived through all of it in the nightmares over and over again. Pain, sorrow, tragedy, madness. Even Sonny himself was affected by this insidious strangeness. His single-minded obsession with learning how to weave, the sudden intensity of his affection toward Elias, the subsequent crushing heartbreak over the young man's death, the unquenching hatred he had felt for the black steed. All of those things were not exactly out of his character, but slightly more consuming than they should have been. Remembering the past few months, Sonny shivered. Sonny whispered, "Wait, wait." Feverishly, he tried to recall all he knew about this nightmare. The 7 knives, the 7 immortals, 1,000 years of solemn duty. The terrible torture one of the rulers of the Ivory City had been subjected to by his own brother. The destruction of the sacred grove. The Shadow Lord making a choice to take a coward's way out before what? Suddenly, an expression of shocked understanding appeared on Sonny's face. He looked at Noctis for a while and then cautiously picked up the emerald amulet. A single word formed in his mind. Sonny breathed, "Hope." The sorcerer smiled, then nodded and looked at the vast expanse of the shattered kingdom below them. Noctis said, "Indeed, hope." Noctis took a sip of wine, the smile disappearing from his face. A few moments later, he said indifferently,
The Lord of Light bound Hope with 7 brilliant shackles and made those shackles eternal. That was us, me and the rest of the Chain Lords. He entrusted each of us with the fate of another and a solemn duty to never let the demon escape. And for a few centuries, everything was fine.
His face grew dark and cold. The sorcerer remained silent for a while, and then continued.
But slowly we grew tired. Doubt found its way into our hearts. Eternity is a heavy burden, sunless, and under its weight, unnoticed, one of us grew twisted, so another one made a choice to uproot the corruption. That was how the first of the Chain Lords died. Ader, my dear friend, murdered by that wicked slayer, Solving, her beautiful grove burned to the ground.
Noctis remained motionless, but the wooden mannequins surrounding them suddenly clenched their fists, their fingers splintering from the immense pressure. Their crude faces did not move, but Sonny could feel an almost palpable feeling of fury radiating from their figures. The sorcerer sighed.
And so all of our fates were sealed. Yes, 6 shackles still remained, but Hope's prison wasn't perfect anymore. Her will, her insidious influence sipped out, little by little, infecting us all, slowly devouring the whole kingdom, every living being in it, from the smallest insect to the mightiest immortal, igniting our desires, twisting them, changing us into something different, something terrible, rampant, and vile.
He laughed.
Oh, of course, none of us noticed it for a long time, hundreds of years even, maybe only shadow, and by the time the rest of us understood, at least those who were still sane enough, it was already too late. The whole of the Kingdom of Hope had been driven mad by its former ruler, had been turned into a vicious hell. We were all taken by Hope.
Noctis smiled and sipped his wine, then chuckled.
So yeah, Sunless, all of us here are insane. I thought you would have known already, judging by the scars covering your body. The warmongers are all insane, and so is their leader, Solving. The citizens of the Ivory City are also mad, just as their 2 rulers are. The one in the north is perhaps the craziest of us all. Well, except for me, of course. I am the maddest person in all of the Kingdom of Hope, I would have you know.
Sonny stared at the gleefully smiling sorcerer, suddenly overwhelmed by terror. Sonny spat. That damned seed, that damned Mordred. Curse the day he told me about how rare and precious it is. The sorcerer chuckled.
Well, I don't know who Mordred and what seed you are talking about. However, there is one thing I do know. Actually, it's a question, that question. It has been tormenting me for centuries, Sunless. Do you know what that question is? What was the seed of my personal madness?
Sunny frowned, then slowly shook his head. Noctis lingered for a few moments, then looked away and said with a wistful smile,
That is a question Ader asked me a long time ago, you see. If the Lord of Light wanted the 7 of us to keep Hope imprisoned forever.
His smile widened slightly, then suddenly dimmed. Noctis asked, Then why did he give each of us a key to her freedom? Sunny remained silent for as long as he could, until, finally, the flaw forced him to give an answer. He looked grimly at Noctis and then said, or rather thought hoarsely. Sunny replied, Maybe he just wanted to see you suffer. Noctis laughed brightly, then nodded.
Oh, indeed, maybe you are right. Gods can be very cruel sometimes. After all, they are much more ancient and vast than kindness and compassion. Or maybe it is not really our lives that keep the demon bound, but instead our will and desire to keep her imprisoned. Or maybe it is a test of our conviction. That is what the Sun Lord believes at least. Or maybe he actually hoped that we would free her. Who knows?
He smiled, then sighed, and finally added, Noctis remarked, If mortals like us could know the will of gods, then we'd be gods instead. After that, a somber silence settled over the deck of the flying ship. Sunny stared at the delicious food in front of him, realizing that he had lost all his appetite. Hope, the demon of desire. How terrifying she was. Slowly, several things that had seemed random and meaningless fell into place. The jubilant crowd in the blood-soaked red Colosseum, the perverse conviction of beautiful solving the harrowing torture of the Sun Prince, the madness that burned in the eyes of the Black Steed. All of it was the result of her harrowing power. Hope held domain over desire after all. And with that power, she had reached through the tiny cracks in her prison and drove a whole realm utterly insane, turning it into a ghastly, hideous, demented hell. Every aspiration, every desire, every dream, every hope were twisted, set aflame, and turned into a weapon. An insidious, invisible weapon that struck at human hearts and minds from within. No one was immune to her power, neither mundane humans nor awakened. Not even saints. Those who were close and those who were far all fell victim to the demon's curse. And what was her own hope? What was the demon of desire yearning for? Well, that was easy. Hope wanted to be free, just like Sunny wanted to be free really. She was driving her jailers mad so that they would destroy each other, and from the looks of it, her curse was working all too well. Solving was seeking out death. The two transcendents of the Ivory City seemed to be on the verge of fratricide, and Noctis was planning to kill them all. The one in the north. Sunny didn't know about the last Chain Lord, but from the little bits of what the sorcerer had said. She was not in her right mind, either. Suddenly, he remembered the sight of the time running in reverse that he had witnessed at the very start of the nightmare. The ivory tower had descended from the sky and the burned wasteland around it had turned into a beautiful white city, which meant that one day, perhaps soon, the Ivory City would be burned to the ground and Hope's prison would then break off its 7 chains and rise above the chained isles. And then, the crushing would be created somehow. A cold, dire feeling grasped his 2 hearts. Sunny groaned, "Oh no." Suddenly, Sunny came to a harrowing realization. His eyes widened and he glanced at Noctis with fear. This was the conflict he, Cassie, Effie, Kai, and Mordred had to resolve to conquer the nightmare. They had to either help this mad sorcerer free the terrifying demon or make sure that she would never escape. The 5 of them were pitted against the 5 immortal saints. A barely audible groan escaped from his lips. Sunny demanded, "How is this possible? What happened to the spell always being fair? How the hell can this be fair?" Another revelation suddenly appeared in his mind. Those words Ader had said before accepting Solving's challenge. The gratitude she expressed. Had Solving really eradicated the blessed of heart god to punish Ader for her heresy? Or had the beautiful warrior known all along what would happen if one of the Chain Lords was killed, and doomed all of the remaining immortals, including herself, to a fate worse than death, to a slow and inevitable descent into madness, followed by eventual destruction, all in order to free Hope from her prison and herself from eternal life. If so, she had indeed been the bravest of them all, and also the most hateful, or admirable, depending on how one looked at it. But that didn't really matter. Sunny grasped the emerald amulet and channeled a somber thought which came out in a hoarse voice. There was one thing that he still couldn't understand. Sunny asked, "The obsidian knife that I carry, the one that you lost, how were you going to kill the other chain lords without it? And without the knowledge about the glass knife that I received from the black steed?" Noctis looked at him for a bit, then smiled darkly.
Ah, that, the drastic thing I was about to do, well, it was a really terrible choice. I am very glad that fate sent you to me when it did, Sunless.
He chuckled.
You see, Sunless, desire is a very powerful thing. In fact, it is perhaps the most powerful thing in the world. It is what the gods were born from after all, in the endless, ever-changing void of chaos. But there is one force more terrifying than desire. And that force is fate.
The sorcerer looked away with a distant expression.
Even gods are afraid of fate, Sunless, so I was going to make a deal with a certain creature. A harrowing, evil, and insidious monster, the vile demon known as Weaver, who holds domain over fate. These knives can kill us because they hold the strings of our fates. So if anyone can find a way to end our lives without the knives, it would be Weaver.
As Noctis mentioned Weaver's name, he shuddered, then forced out a pale smile.
But the demon of fate would have asked a terrible price of me, I'm sure, so it is very fortunate that you came along. Just imagine, that fiend would have made me into something ugly, or even worse, poorly dressed. The horror.
Noctis laughed and gave one of the sailor dolls a command to bring another amphora of wine. He either didn't notice or pretended to overlook the sudden tension that appeared in Sunny's eyes. Sunny thought, so, Noctis wanted to make a deal with Weaver to free Hope. And then, I suddenly appeared. A cold shiver suddenly ran down his spine. Sunny wondered, what exactly does that mean? Sometime later, Sunny was back in his luxurious cabin, sitting on the soft bed and staring at the wall with a distant look on his bestial face. After the dinner conversation that was rife with revelations, each more terrible than the other, he had told Noctis that he needed time to think before giving an answer. Despite the fact that Sunny now held the keys to possessing two of Sun God's knives, the sorcerer had not pressed him at all and agreed to wait with his usual carefree attitude. If there was one redeeming quality about the immortals, it was that they could be very patient. Now, the flying ship was moving, sailing across the skies on its way back to the sanctuary of Noctis. They would be arriving in a day or two. By then, Sunny needed to know what he wanted to do and how. He had to find the others and conquer this cursed nightmare somehow. Help Noctis free Hope, or make sure that she stays imprisoned forever. A pale smile appeared on his face. Hope. How funny it was to learn that this whole realm had been driven mad by the subtle, irresistible, inescapable manipulation of the great and terrible demon of desire. Everyone here was subjugated by her wondrous harrowing powers, including himself. Back in the dark city at his lowest point, Sunny had given all hope of ever returning to the real world. In fact, he had convinced himself that hope was the deadliest, most vile of poisons. It was only after he had clawed his way back from the brink of madness and out of the forgotten shore, returning alive to the waking world, that he understood the erroneous and destructive harmfulness of that misguided belief. Sunny had built a modest life for himself and found out that there were people who genuinely cared about him. And even more importantly, that there were people whom he cared about himself. That hope was not something to fear, but instead something to draw power from. Something so vital that without it, there was no way to survive and no real point to. So, learning that his mind was now literally being poisoned by hope was full of incredibly bitter irony. Sunny muttered, "How fitting." He sighed and then stared at his four calloused hands. The obsidian knife, the ivory knife, the glass knife, the wooden knife, and one more which he knew nothing about. Could they really collect them all? Noctis, Solvane, the Sun twins, the one in the north. Could they really survive them all? Whether he liked it or not, there was only one inevitable way to find out. First things first. He was going to have to make his way to the Iron Hand Island to see if the others had left clues to their whereabouts. Luckily, it was not that far from the sanctuary. Noctis had said that Sunny's new heart needed a week or two to settle, whatever that meant, so he wouldn't be able to go right away. But the goal was already in sight. After the cohort was reunited, they would have to make a decision about which side to support. The others. Sunny wondered where they were and how they were doing. Were they even alive? Had their journey in the nightmare been as harrowing as his? Recalling his own struggles, he shivered. The nightmares. Most of them had faded from his memory, their details dissipating until all that was left was one dark, chaotic mess of vague images, pressing weight and sharp emotions. But some were still clear and vivid in all their terrible splendor, especially the first ones he had lived through. He remembered it all, being a father who watched the flames consume his son, wife, and unborn child. An old man who dragged his weak body across scorching ash as his whole world burned around him. An immortal warrior being endlessly tortured by his own brother. And a cunning shadow who had grown too tired and indifferent to care about life. That last one was perhaps the most damning, not because it was especially torturous. On the contrary, the Shadow Lord had been content and at peace in his last moments. But because it showed Sunny the pain and sorrow of those whom the heartless immortal had left behind. That understanding was only made worse by witnessing how the Shadow's beloved steed had ended up, lonesome, broken, and consumed by madness, guarding the empty castle that his master would never return to until his last pitiful breath. But that was the nature of life. As one went through it, they collected strings and tethers that connected them to others. Everyone's fates were intertwined. And everyone was tied down and bound by those numerous connections. Some of them fleeting, some deep and precious. Sunny, too, was not untethered anymore. Which meant that, should he die or be destroyed, his would not be the only fate that was broken and damaged. Everyone connected to him would suffer too. And that, in a way, made him responsible not only for himself, but also for those whose lives he had made different. The weight of that unfamiliar responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. Sunny sighed. Was there really such a thing as freedom? And if there was, would anyone really want to possess it? He closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by all these daunting thoughts. Even though he had forgotten most of the nightmares, they still changed him. He felt older somehow and, hopefully, wiser, more mature and tempered, but also more fragile. He spent some time in silence, listening to the hull of the flying ship creaking gently around him and his two hearts beating steadily in his chest. Then Sunny breathed out and opened his eyes. There was not much time to spend on pondering and self-reflection. A nightmare was a place for action, not philosophy. The corner of his mouth curved upward. Sunny said, "Fine, let's get ready to act then. First, I should finally, check on all those rewards I received, thanks to that damned horse." And there were plenty. Sunny got comfortable on his criminally soft bed, picked up a few succulent grapes from the tray placed on an intricate table near it, threw one in his mouth, and finally summoned the runes.
Oh, let's see.
The first thing he glanced at was the shadow fragments counter. He vaguely remembered receiving what felt like much more than 6 after slaying the black steed, who had been an awakened terror. So, Sunny was hopeful to see a pleasant number. However, when he did see it, he almost choked on the grape juice to death. Sunny sputtered, What the spell? What? He even rubbed his eyes, thinking that he was seeing things, but no. The counter was the same. Shadow fragments. 2823 3000. Sunny stared at it in disbelief. Sunny breathed. 600. I received almost 600 fragments for killing that damned horse. Absent-mindedly, he threw another grape into his mouth and proceeded to almost bite off one of his fingers from the sheer disorientation of it all. Sunny demanded, "How is this even possible?" He thought about it for a bit, stunned, and then tilted his head a little. Sunny ventured, could it be? One of the advantages, but also inherent drawbacks of Sunny's aspect, was that it operated through shadow fragments instead of the usual soul ones. So, while Sunny didn't need to collect and absorb shards to grow stronger, he also could not use the shards of creatures that he had not personally slain for that purpose. The other detail was that, unlike all human awakened, he did not receive a portion of all the accumulated soul fragments after killing others of his own kind, and instead received just one or two depending on their rank. Was that perhaps because the spell, or rather the world itself, did not consider him a human? He was a divine shadow after all, and shadows recognized him as one of their own. So, would it be safe to say that in this context his own kind were actually not humans but shadows instead? The Black Steed had been a shadow created by one of the Chain Lords, an awakened terror possessing 6 cores, and with 1,000 years of battles and bloodshed behind his shoulders to fill them to the brim with shadow fragments. Did Sunny receive a portion of the fragments accumulated by the tenebrous courser throughout his long and grim life, as a normal awakened would after slaying another human? The math certainly supported that theory. Sunny's eyes ignited. Sunny exclaimed, that is it. Not only was he correct, he might have just stumbled on one of the most crucial secrets about his own aspect, power, and future. Ever since finding out that his aspect allowed him to form and possess multiple cores, Sunny had been wary of the eventual toll hunting down enough nightmare creatures to create a new one would exert. As a sleeper, or even an awakened, he was too small and vulnerable. Any powerful abomination would have been able to snuff him out of existence with no more than a glance. The higher he climbed on the path of ascension, the less of such existences there would be, and thus the higher his chances of survival were going to become. However, that also meant that there would be fewer creatures he would be able to hunt down to collect shadow fragments, since slaying those lower than him in rank did not give him any at all. But now that he knew how much he could gain from destroying true shadow creatures, perhaps there was still a way for him to grow stronger rapidly even after becoming a master. In any case, his progress was already staggering. First, the 1,000 fragments he had earned in the blood-soaked arena of the Red Colosseum, and now these hundreds he gained by slaying the Nightmare Steed. Neither of these feats had been easy. In fact, both rewards had cost him an unimaginable amount of pain, torment, damage both mental and physical, but the result almost made it seem as though it had all been worth it. Almost. At the start of the nightmare, the idea of gaining enough fragments to create a 4th core had seemed so distant and unreachable, but now, just a few months later, Sunny was already near the finish line. This fact was both exciting and incredible, even if its splendor was somewhat overshadowed by all the hideous scars he had received along the way. Sunny insisted. No, it is still amazing. I survived, did I not? Both elated and reminded of the horrors he had been subjected to in the nightmare, Sunny stared at the unbelievable number for some time, then shifted his gaze elsewhere. The second reward he had received was also very welcomed, be it strangely unexpected. In fact, Sunny stumbled upon it almost by accident while seeking the runes describing his shadows. Before that, he had noticed that the runes of the mantle of the underworld seemed to shimmer a bit differently. Confused, he concentrated on them and shifted his gaze to the last string describing the enchantments of the onyx armor, the counter of victories tied to the Prince of the Underworld enchantment. Now, it read, vanquished foes, 3291 6000. He blinked. Sunny let out a stunned breath. Somehow, sometime, he had managed to raise the counter by almost 1,000 victories. He knew that the nightmare creatures and humans he had killed in the Red Colosseum had not counted toward the requirements of the strange enchantment for a simple reason. He had not been wearing the mantle of the underworld while fighting them. So where had the 1,000 vanquished foes come from? Sunny frowned. Sunny mused. Come to think of it, I was wearing the armor while sleeping in the Boundary Fortress. Did it actually accept every battle I won in the nightmares as a true victory? That would be very strange, since the enemies he had defeated in the never-ending nightmares had been just phantasms summoned by the Black Steed, and not in any way real. However, that would also make sense. After all, the mantle did not care about him actually killing the enemies. All it cared about was that he had overpowered and defeated the opponent. If so, did it really matter if the opponent was real or not? The duelists of the dreamscape had been considered sufficiently real, so why would the creatures populating the nightmares be different? Sunny whispered, 1,000 souls. Had I really killed that many? Suddenly, Sunny felt cold and somber. How many nightmares, exactly, had he lived through during those several terrible hours? Full of dark wonder, he shook his head and looked away from the runes describing the onyx armor. He was already halfway to satiating its mysterious enchantment, which was already good enough. Finally, Sunny looked at the cluster that interested him the most, his shadows. A few runes shimmered beautifully in the darkness. They read, Shadows, Marble Saint, Soul Serpent. And then a new one. Nightmare. Sunny remained motionless for a while, a pale smile appearing on his face. Beyond the window of his cabin, the sky was slowly turning black, the stars shining on its velvet surface as they welcomed the arrival of the newborn moon. Sunny murmured, Nightmare, so that is your name. What better name could there be for a shadow that moved through human dreams, turning them into visions of horror? He hesitated for a few moments, then looked away, turning to a different string of runes first. There was another shadow of his that had changed, the Soul Serpent. Every time Sunny moved up a class, so did the serpent. And every time Sunny mastered a new step of shadow dance, the serpent ascended to a new rank. At least that was how things were supposed to go. Shadow Soul Serpent, shadow rank ascended, shadow class demon, shadow attributes, shadow guide, soul weapon, soul beast. Sunny sighed, Sunny breathed, ascended. Now that he had mastered the third step of the shadow dance, the serpent had, indeed, evolved as well. The tenebrous creature was now an ascended demon, just like Saint. Both of them had left Sunny in the dust, while it hurt his pride a little that his shadows were more powerful than him. Not to mention way cooler, according to some tasteless brats. Having two creatures of such formidable might under his command was going to be of tremendous help without a doubt. Especially considering the caliber of enemies he would most likely have to face in this trial. He glanced down at the intricate tattoo coiling around his arms and torso. It seemed larger. Sunny could already feel the rush of the essence through his body. Its rate of expenditure and speed of replenishment increased even further. Not only was the serpent going to be much more powerful in its soul beast form, but also, from now on, any soul weapon Sunny would want to use would be of the ascended rank. As well, basically, he now had a vast arsenal of ascended armaments to choose from. Sunny remarked, Well, isn't that neat? Sunny lingered for a few moments, then continued to read the runes. The serpent was not supposed to gain any new abilities from rising to a new rank, just like Saint had not. However, that legacy shadow of his was a bit strange. It had come into possession of the soul beast attribute and the soul reaver ability the last time he mastered a step of the aspect legacy after all. Who knew, maybe this time would be the same. And just as Sunny hoped, there was a new set of runes shining in the darkness. Shadow abilities, Serpentine Steel, Soul Reaver, Grace of Shadows. He frowned. Sunny muttered, Grace of Shadows. Sunny concentrated on the new ability and read. Ability description. The master of the Soul Serpent can grace another with the trust and companionship of their shadow guide. One should be careful whom they bestow with their grace, and trusting others with the loyalty of shadows is the same as sharing one's soul, and thus should not be offered lightly. He tilted his head. Sunny breathed, What? So basically, this ability allowed Sunny to transfer the ownership of the Soul Serpent to someone else, as though the shadow was just an echo. No, not quite. Echoes could be transferred only to other awakened, while the grace of shadows could be bestowed upon anyone with a shadow, presumably. If Sunny wanted to, he could gift the Soul Serpent to a random nightmare creature, like the Mordant Mimic, for example. That would have been funny. Sunny snapped. What? No, it wouldn't have. Why would he give away his precious serpent? Especially considering that the description hinted that doing so would leave him vulnerable. What nonsense was this? Sunny grimaced. Well, not every ability could be a winner. This one was rather useless. He could imagine a situation where lending the soul serpent to one of the cohort members would be beneficial, but just barely. It would be easier to just command the creature himself. With a sigh, he commanded the serpent to slither off of his skin and present itself for inspection. A few moments later, Sunny flinched back. Sunny yelped, "What? Where? Where did my cute little snake go?" The shadow had changed a lot, indeed. Before, the soul serpent had not really been a cute little snake, but its size was at least not too terrible, no more than 6 meters in length at best. But now, a Stygian creature of at least twice that size sprawled through the cabin, its mighty body covered in adamantine jet-black scales and as thick as a tree trunk. Its terrifying maw was wide enough to swallow Sunny whole. Well, at least his real human body. And its triangular head hovered near the ceiling, 2 tenebrous eyes looking at him from above. The soul serpent was so large that it barely fit into the confines of the cabin, suddenly making it look small and fragile. Sunny gulped. Sunny stammered, What a good boy you are. Nice snake. You can return now, buddy." The shadow stared at him for a few more seconds, then hissed deeply and moved, its scales rustling on the floorboards. Soon it turned back into an intricate, beautiful tattoo. Sunny remained motionless for a few moments, shaken, and then slowly grinned. Sunny said, "Good, perfect. If even I am afraid of that thing, imagine how my enemies will feel." Sometime later, Sunny commanded the serpent to turn itself into the black Odachi and sat quietly for a while, glancing at its somber steel. Every centimeter of this weapon was familiar to him, and yet it felt different. The great blade felt sharper, stronger, far more devastating. This was a weapon one could cut a mountain with. He willed the soul weapon to shift into a spear, then a tang dao, then a takai, and finally a battle axe. All of them felt the same. Deadly and brimming with dark power. Only the axe seemed a little bit off. The serpent could take any form, but was limited by Sunny's knowledge. The better he knew a weapon, the better he could imagine it to the smallest of details. The greater the result would be. And so, while he could command it to assume any shape, those that he had experience with would produce the best result. He feasted his eyes on the somber steel for a bit, and then put the shadow aside. It was time to check on the rest of his rewards. Since Sunny's mind had been preoccupied with the soul serpent and his aspect legacy for the last few minutes, he decided to continue with that. Summoning the runes one more time, he looked to the bottom of the shimmering field of symbols and concentrated on a certain string. Aspect Legacy, Shadow Dance. Shadow Dance Mastery Level 3-7. First relic claimed. Second relic claimed. Third relic claimed. Sunny hesitated for a long time, his face turning grim. What the hell was he going to do if the third relic turned out to be another drop of ichor? Wasted again. Sunny cursed bitterly. Finally, he inhaled deeply and thought. Sunny commanded, "Claim." For a moment, nothing happened, and then the spell whispered into his ear.
You have claimed an aspect legacy relic. You have received a memory.
Sunny gritted his teeth and looked up at the list of his memories. Then, a relieved sigh escaped from his lips. It was not a drop of Shadow God's blood. Instead, an unfamiliar combination of runes appeared at the end of the list. It read, Memory Shadow Lantern. Sunny read the runes with curiosity. Memory Shadow Lantern, memory rank Divine. He fell from the bed. Sunny gasped, "What?" Another divine memory. Feeling cold sweat rolling down his face, Sunny wiped it off with a trembling hand and slowly clenched his fists. Sunny muttered, Should be interesting. He looked back to the runes, trying to calm his wildly beating hearts. Just what kind of a relic had he received? Sunny got a hold of himself and continued to read the description. Memory Tier I, Memory Type Tool. Sunny mused, a tool makes sense. It is a lantern after all. But what does it do? Lanterns are supposed to produce light and illuminate things. That's not exactly what shadows are known for, is it? With a concerned frown, he looked back at the runes. Memory description.
Death is just the shadow of life, said the gods of life, and peace is just the failure of war. Have you ever been something that had not been stolen, made empty and vile? Have you ever done something that was not futile and hollow? Can you even exist without being cast by another? Look at how weak you are, how small you are. Am I supposed to be frightened of a small shadow? Made pale and feeble by the radiance of day, Shadow laughed and rose from the ground. As he did, his figure swallowed the land, devoured the heavens, and blotted out the light of the sun. Soon there was nothing left around them but darkness, and from that darkness a hiss came, making life tremble. Life is just the prelude to death, and war is just the key to open its gates. Everything you cherish, everything you nurture, everything that starts with you will one day be mine, be welcomed by me, swallowed by me, and find peace within me. This is the mercy of shadow, hollow, futile. You might have come first, my sister, but when your cruelty ends, I will be all that remains.
Sunny shivered. Sunny stammered, "D-damn, was Shadow God always that creepy?" Due to his closeness and affinity to shadows, he had never thought about the god of shadows as terrifying. After all, even other gods had not held Shadow in high regard, at least from what Sunny knew. His temples had been burned and destroyed, his followers turned into slaves. Even his aspects and attributes seemed to pale in comparison to others. God of peace, death, solace, and mysteries. That sounded humble and rather inconspicuous when compared to something like Goddess of the Black Skies. The god of storms, depths of the oceans of darkness, stars, travel, guidance, and disaster. But things that preferred to remain unseen and unheard were often the most dangerous, weren't they? Sort of like Sunny himself. He shook his head, pondered about the description for a bit, and then smiled crookedly. Sunny mused, "I guess War God did not like Shadow God at all. Well, that's not surprising. In many ways, they are the opposite of each other. No wonder every time I meet someone from the war camp, I end up either having my heart torn out or, even worse, lured into a nightmare so cursed that all other nightmares ought to give it face." He sighed, then continued reading the runes. Memory enchantments, gates of shadow. Enchantment description: this lantern devours light and can contain and then release an infinite amount of shadows. Sunny blinked. Sunny let out a puzzled sound. The enchantment didn't seem like much for a divine relic. That was unless one really thought about the meaning behind those words. Infinite. He suspected that in this case, the word was used to describe an actual infinity instead of a fake one like with the endless spring. If that was the truth, yes, an object that could contain infinity was indeed worthy of being divine. It simply broke all the laws of reason. However, how did it help Sunny? He frowned, a little bit disappointed. Sunny grumbled. Why couldn't it be a nasty, all-destroying sword instead? He summoned the memory and saw a small lantern weave itself from darkness in his hand. The thing was not too big, about the size of his palm, and made out of black. Something. It didn't feel or look like any material he had ever seen, resembling stone more than anything. The frame of the lantern was intricately engraved, making it seem and feel like the scales of a serpent, and its walls were made out of glossy black morion. There was a ring of dark metal on its top, with a short chain attached to it. It could be held in a hand or fastened to one's belt if need be. As soon as the lantern appeared, the darkness of the night that surrounded Sunny instantly became deeper and colder, oppressive and impenetrable. Any hint of starlight was devoured, turning the interior of the cabin completely black. He, of course, could still see through that darkness, but anyone else would probably have a lot of trouble. Suddenly full of a pleasant feeling of comfort, Sunny turned the beautiful lantern around and noticed a small door on one of its walls. He hesitated, then commanded the door to open. It instantly slid forward, revealing a square of utter nothingness behind. A moment later, Sunny felt his hair stand on end and his heart stagger in his chest. He was suddenly cold, overwhelmed by unease and terrified. Like an animal facing something so much larger than itself that the difference in size could simply not be comprehended. He slowly exhaled, the breath escaping his mouth as chilling mist. Sunny murmured, "I guess that is how infinity feels." The lantern was empty, so he couldn't command any shadows to escape it. So, instead, he glanced at the happy shadow and raised an eyebrow. Sunny asked, "Wanna come inside?" The shadow looked at him with fear, then energetically shook its head. Sunny rolled his eyes, then turned to the creepy one. Sunny asked, "What about you?" The creepy guy stared at him for a bit, then shrugged indifferently, and disappeared into the small door as though he had never been there. Sunny could still vaguely feel their connection, but not in the way that he was used to. He couldn't see, hear, or sense what the shadow was seeing, hearing, and sensing. All he knew was that it still existed, somewhere else in a terrible, vast, dark, and cold place. His face grew dim, and he commanded the creepy shadow to return. The weird guy flowed out of the lantern, shrugged again, and planted himself back on the floor. Then, when it thought that no one was watching, the shadow shuddered and hugged itself for a moment. Sunny muttered, "What a strange memory. What was the use of it?" Sunny summoned Saint and tried to repeat the experiment, but to no avail. The tenebrous night remained motionless when he told her to enter the beautiful black lantern, not showing any signs of knowing how to abide by the order. Sunny conceded, "I guess it doesn't work with shadows." He frowned, then lowered the lantern to the ground and brought it closer to wild shadows hiding in the corners of the cabin. Then, feeling extremely stupid, Sunny thought aloud. Sunny ventured, "Do you want to come inside?" The shadows moved slightly, flowing toward the lantern, and then swiftly slid through the black door. A hint of a smile appeared on Sunny's bestial face. Sunny murmured, "Ah, now we're talking. That I can work with." Satisfied, he closed the door of the lantern and then dismissed it. Sunny was still a little bit sad that the relic had not turned out to be a destructive weapon, but his disappointment waned. While not as immediately useful, the lantern would allow him to carry friendly shadows, an infinite amount of them, no less, with him at all times. That would counteract the main weakness of his aspect, the fact that most of his abilities only worked within the veil of darkness, to a large degree. And without a doubt, as his powers grew and the number of his abilities increased, having a swarm of deep shadows at hand would only grow more useful. Plus, he had a feeling that he had not discovered all the secrets of the shadow lantern yet. But now it was time to study his last and most important reward. It was time to meet an old friend, the shadow of the black steed whose name was Nightmare. Sunny sighed, then closed his eyes and dove into the soul sea. The tranquil, lightless expanse of his soul was the same as ever. The black water was still and silent, reflecting the three dark suns looming in a perfectly even triangle above. Only the rows of motionless shadows were different from how they had been before, crowded with countless victims of the Red Colosseum. Despite the fact that Sunny's body was now very different, his soul remained the same. He walked to stand between the three shadow cores and called upon Nightmare. A beautiful black steed walked out of a whirlwind of dark flames in front of him and stopped, its adamantine hooves sending ripples through the silent waters. The shadow was just as he remembered it, tall and graceful, with a lustrous jet-black coat and lean muscles rolling under the skin. Its mane was long and luscious, and its tenebrous eyes glowed with fearsome crimson flames. The courser had 2 long horns and a mouth full of sharp fangs that resembled that of a wolf. The horns, the fangs, and the hooves were all forged out of a strange black metal that seemed to be able to compete with the impenetrable onyx of the mantle of the underworld. Sunny shuddered, remembering the pain and shock of being struck and bitten by them. As soon as Nightmare appeared, he felt a whispering fear appear in his mind. Strangely tense, Sunny took a step forward and raised one of his hands. Patting the stallion on the muzzle, Sunny said softly, "Hey there, we meet again, old friend." Nightmare was, indeed, an old friend of his, at least of the part of him that had relived the final day of the Shadow Lord's life and their last exhilarating ride together. But just like Sunny was a different person now, this beautiful shadow was too. The madness was gone from the stallion's crimson eyes, and so was the burden of hundreds of years of sorrow and loneliness. It was as though the black steed was now reborn, still remaining the same being, but also somehow renewed by the purifying darkness of death. As Sunny patted his muzzle, Nightmare pressed it against the calloused hand and looked at his master with a pale, distant hint of recognition. The crimson glow of his eyes ignited with a new intensity, and the black steed snorted, its voice full of quiet affection. Satisfied, Sunny summoned the runes into existence and glanced at them, curious to see what exactly his new shadow was capable of. He read, Shadow Nightmare, Shadow Rank Awakened, Shadow Class Terror, Shadow Description. This beautiful steed was tamed by the treacherous lost from light in the depths of a harrowing dream. The two shadows battled across countless nightmares, shattering them all apart. Neither was willing to give up, so in the end, the nightmares did. Sunny sighed. Sunny grumbled, again with that treacherous nonsense. At least the spell did not openly mock me this time. He still remembered the biting description of Shadow Dance. Shaking his head dejectedly, Sunny rubbed the terrible scar on his neck and turned his attention back to the runes. Shadow attributes: Swift, Dark Destrier, Dreadlord, Dreamwalker. Swift attribute description: this shadow is especially swift and enduring. Dark Destrier attribute description: this dark horse was meant to be a shadow warrior's steed and accompany its rider into battle. It is fierce, loyal, and knows no fear. Its speed, strength, and resilience grow when surrounded by darkness and shadows. Dreadlord attribute description: this shadows might grows the more he is feared. Dreamwalker attribute description: this shadow can travel through dreams. Sunny studied the black courser with a thoughtful expression. Sunny let out a low breath. So, Nightmare was incredibly swift and enduring. He was also a war horse, bred to ride into battle without hesitation or fear. What's more, he had two passive attributes that both increased his speed, strength, and resilience. One when the Destrier and his rider were surrounded by shadows, the other when the Destrier inspired terror in the hearts of their enemies. That was an insidious and frightening combination, especially because one effect fed into the other, creating a vicious cycle. Perhaps Sunny had only survived the battle with the terror due to the fact that, at some point, his tortured mind had become too broken to experience fear. An awakened terror was already an immensely powerful creature, and with two passive augmentations added into the mix, he shivered. Sunny whispered, "Scary." And then there was the last attribute, Dreamwalker. That one, Sunny didn't even know what to think about. Sunny mused, "We'll see about invading people's dreams later. Wouldn't it be fun to jump into Mordred's mind one day and give him a taste of his own medicine?" With a dark grin, Sunny slowly exhaled and continued to read the runes. Attributes were, without a doubt, very important, especially excellent ones like what Nightmare possessed. But it was the abilities that mattered the most. Shadow abilities: Flowing Shadow, Mantle of Fear, Nightmare, Dream Curse. Flowing Shadow ability description: this steed can dive into shadows and move through them with incredible speed. Sunny smiled. Sunny observed, "Ah, so basically, it is like Shadow Step without the teleportation part. Still very useful and works perfectly with my own ability." He turned back to the runes, his mood elevated. Mantle of Fear ability description: this shadow is capable of delivering a continuous mind attack around it that infects its foes with crippling fear. Sunny couldn't help but whistle. Sunny breathed, that is just damn. The ability to radiate an aura of terror was already incredible enough. It could debilitate weaker enemies completely, and even if more powerful creatures were able to resist some of the effect, a seed of dread was still going to be planted into their minds. And that was directly tied to the Dreadlord attribute of Nightmare, which made him stronger the more he was feared. Sunny whispered, "Scary, so scary." It was a good thing that Sunny had been wearing the mantle of the underworld when he met the Black Steed. The onyx armor gifted him with a good amount of protection against mind attacks. After all, with his smile growing both wider and a bit pale, he moved to the next ability. Nightmare ability description: this shadow can create and subjugate nightmares. The more nightmares serve it, the more powerful it grows, both inside and outside dreams. Dormant nightmares 0. Sunny stared at the runes for a while, trying to make sense of them. Sunny let out a slow breath. So, Nightmare's tyrant ability, the one that allowed him to create minions, was meant to subjugate real nightmares. Not any kind of beings made of flesh and bone, but actual dreams. And the more of them served him, the more powerful he grew. These nightmares, it seemed, possessed a rank of their own which was currently dormant, one lower than the Black Steed's own. Additionally, there were currently 0 of them under his authority. But how could one create a nightmare, or subjugate it? Sunny had no idea. What he did understand, though, was why his own journey through the countless nightmares had ended when it did. It seemed that each of the harrowing dreams Sunny experienced had been either collected or made by the original nightmare throughout the centuries, and once all of them were destroyed, he broke free of the Black Steed's hold. Sunny murmured, "Interesting." Sunny was going to have to figure out how to get his shadow some minions of its own. Something told him that the process was going to be neither straightforward nor easy. With a sigh, he glanced at the last ability that Nightmare possessed. This one was called Dream Curse, but looked different from all the rest. The runes constituting the string were dull and lifeless, as though the ability was not accessible. And indeed, when he tried to concentrate on it, a few new runes appeared. Nightmares required, 0-1000, Sunny grimaced, Sunny grumbled, "Damnation. I guess being a true terror is not that simple." Still, his new shadow was a fearsome one. Not only was it a swift and mighty steed, it was also a force on the battlefield in its own right, one that could instill fear in the hearts of his enemies, and then feed on it to grow stronger. More than that, it was a true shadow creature, which meant that its attributes and abilities went perfectly with his own. Sunny had experienced the terrifying fury of the Black Courser himself. So he felt giddy knowing that this fearsome creature was going to be fighting on his side from now on. Gods knew he was going to need as many powerful allies as he could find. His smile dimmed a little. There was one very obvious flaw about Nightmare. It wasn't the Black Steed's fault, of course, but saddened Sunny nevertheless. He let out a deep sigh. Sunny sighed, "Yeah, if only you came with a saddle." How was he supposed to ride this scary horse without a saddle? What nonsensical injustice was this? Not wishing to disparage the noble steed, Sunny hid his dismay, patted Nightmare on the back and grinned. Sunny declared, "Good horse Nightmare, don't you worry. You and I are going to terrorize so many humans, nightmare creatures, and vile immortals that you'll collect some nasty dreams in no time. They will all be scared of us, you'll see. The only thing scarier than a treacherous shadow is a treacherous shadow atop a magnificent shadow horse after all. I think that's how the saying goes, or not. In any case, you and I will do great and terrible things together. If there is no such saying yet, there will be soon." With a satisfied grin, Sunny dismissed the Black Courser, then left the Soul Sea and lay down on his bed, enjoying its immaculate softness. Tiredly closing his eyes, he thought. Sunny murmured, "I really, really deserve some rest." And as the flying ship of a mad sorcerer sailed across the sky, he fell peacefully asleep. The time Sunny woke up, the ship was already approaching the sanctuary. Looking out of the window, he saw a familiar island below them. In his time, it was occupied by a fearsome, corrupted abomination. He wondered if it was still, or rather already, nesting there. In any case, from here, the sanctuary was just a couple of chains away. With a sign, Sunny dressed himself and left the cabin, heading for the upper deck. Once outside, he saw sailor dolls moving around with graceful precision, hoisting sails and performing other tasks. Noctis was standing at the helm, wearing a completely new extravagant robe and whistling a light-hearted melody. Noticing Sunny, the sorcerer smiled.
"Ah, Sunlist, how fortunate it is that you are awake. We are almost home."
He glanced forward and waved a hand, accidentally sending the ship into a lateral spin. The wooden mannequins somehow remained attached to the deck, but Sunny had to grab a handrail to not be thrown overboard. He gave the immortal transcendent a resentful look. Noctis smiled sheepishly. Noctis apologized. "Oh, sorry about that." Shaking his head, Sunny ascended the stairs and joined the sorcerer at the bridge, which was situated at the stern of the enchanted vessel. From there, he observed the landscape of the Kingdom of Hope in silence, until a familiar silhouette of a vast ring of menhirs standing atop a small island appeared in sight, surrounded by a white cloud of water vapor that came from several beautiful waterfalls. The sanctuary. It was nice to see it again. In this harrowing nightmare, it almost felt like home. Noctis grinned. Noctis declared, "That is it. The sanctuary of Noctis, my beautiful lair. Isn't it pretty?" Sunny hesitated, then took the emerald amulet out of the folds of his black garment and thought. Sunny replied, "I guess, but isn't it a bit presumptuous to call it after yourself?" The sorcerer laughed.
No, you misunderstood. Initially it was called the Temple of the Moon. I built it as a shrine to my great-grandmother. I was perfectly content living there alone, but as the Kingdom of Hope went from bad to worse, stragglers started coming to my lands in search of a safe shelter from all the madness. I didn't have the heart, or rather, didn't care that much, to turn them away, so they started calling it the Sanctuary of Noctis. Why, it's a very nice name if you ask me.
Sunny stared at him for a few moments, then said in a somber tone. Sunny asked, "Who is your great-grandmother?" Noctis turned to him and blinked a couple of times, an expression of surprise clearly written on his beautiful face. Noctis answered, "Well, who else? The goddess of the moon, of course." Sunny paled. Sunny demanded, "How does this even make sense?" He opened his mouth to say something, then shut it and decided not to think about it too much. Noticing this reaction, Noctis shrugged with a confused expression. Noctis remarked, "Whom did you think I inherited my unparalleled looks from? People as gorgeous as I don't grow on trees, you know. Well, usually. Unless it is a very special tree, I guess." Sunny gritted his teeth and tried very hard not to think anything aloud. Soon, the flying ship descended from the skies and hovered in the center of the ring of giant menhirs. The sacred tree that grew on its deck situated right above the one growing on a small island surrounded by the pool of clear water, an altar of pure white stone drowning in the shade of its wide branches. Sunny saw dozens of people staring up with odd expressions, and involuntarily searched for familiar faces. It was futile, of course. Even if others were somehow here, they were going to look different from their real selves after all. Noctis grinned. Noctis announced, "Welcome to the sanctuary. You'll like it here for sure. Everyone here is very reasonable and nice, just like me." Hearing that statement, Sunny shivered. Together, they left the flying vessel and walked through the garden, heading to the sorcerer's private quarters. Coincidentally, the residence was situated in the same place where the White Feather clan had established their stronghold in the future. Noctis built his home inside the Ring of Menhirs itself, however, instead of on top of it. As they walked, Sunny studied the inhabitants of the sanctuary of the past. Most of them seemed like normal people. Some of them were mundane, and some were awakened. They didn't seem to be in the throes of madness. However, after the cruel lesson that had been taught him in the Red Colosseum, he couldn't help but keep his guard up. Sunny's gaze shifted from person to person, evaluating them for potential danger. That young woman holding a young child by the hand seemed harmless, but why was the child so frightened? That man with a neatly trimmed beard seemed gentle and kind, but why was the hilt of his sword so polished and worn? That beggar who sat lonesomely by himself, his body and face disfigured and wrapped in bandages like that of a leper, seemed too weak to pose a threat. But why was his gaze so sharp, his fingers so calloused? And that old woman with a basket of fruit in her arms, why was she watching them so intently? Sunny shook his head, then looked away. Sunny muttered, "Being vigilant is good, but this is just the madness speaking. Wishing to be safe is also a desire, and so it can also be twisted by hope's influence. After the torments I experienced in the Red Colosseum and the nightmares, my mind is already unstable. I need to keep myself in check or something terrible will happen." What dangers could there be here in the stronghold of an immortal saint? As long as Noctis himself did not decide to attack Sunny, he would be more or less safe. And speaking of Noctis, the sorcerer led him to a beautifully engraved wooden door, then opened it and led Sunny inside. His residence was just as one could expect, spacious, decorated with the most exquisite furnishings, and populated by all kinds of magical servants. Staring at a mop that was dutifully washing the floors without anyone holding it, Sunny felt cold shivers running down his spine. He had a suspicion of how the sailor dolls were made. Sunny muttered, "Don't tell me that the lunatic actually used someone's soul to enchant this damned mop." Noctis grinned. Noctis said, "I know what you are thinking." Sunny flinched and stared at the immortal with tense apprehension. The sorcerer nodded solemnly. Noctis continued, "What is for breakfast, right? Oh, don't you worry, Sunless. I take breakfasts very seriously. Let us eat, then drink, then talk." He sighed. Noctis added, "I'm sure you have a lot of questions. I have a couple myself, to be honest." After a full and delightful meal, the two of them sat in silence for a while, enjoying their drinks. Noctis was consuming a truly unwise amount of wine with an absent-minded smile on his face, while Sunny stuck to tea. The beautiful porcelain cup looked tiny and fragile in his massive clawed hand, sunlight reflecting from the ember surface of the fragrant drink. In this rare moment of peace, he suddenly found himself overwhelmed by apathy and melancholy. Sunny was used to often feeling his heart beating with anger, fear, and resentment, but this strange lethargy was new and unwelcome. He didn't like it at all. Searching for a way to entertain himself and chase it away, he suddenly glanced at the immortal sorcerer with a dangerous gleam in his eyes. Sunny lingered for a few moments, and then picked up the emerald amulet.
"Lord Noctis, you have been a very gracious host to me. You have given me shelter, showered me with gifts, and provided me with many delicious foods. Let me share the traditional food of my people with you as well. That will make me feel better."
The immortal transcendent raised an eyebrow and looked at him with doubt. Then, a curious grin appeared on his face.
"Oh, exotic food, how wonderful. Do you need any ingredients to cook it?"
Sunny calmly shook his head, then summoned the covetous coffer. The toothy box weaved itself from sparks of light and appeared on the table. Then, it saw the sorcerer, trembled, and scurried over to hide behind one of Sunny's hands. Noctis watched the coffer appear with sincere amusement.
"And that little creature of yours reminds me of someone. What a cutie."
Sunny reached into the box and produced a tube of synth paste, then handed it to the immortal with a polite smile. Noctis took the tube, stared at it in confusion for a while, then brought it closer to his face and sniffed it.
"Such a peculiar container. It doesn't smell like anything."
Sunny nodded solemnly and made a twisting motion with his hand.
"You twist the cap off, pierce the membrane, and then squirt the contents into your mouth. Be warned, though, some people have said that its flavor is simply unmatched, unparalleled even, and that there is no other food like this in the entire world. Many shed tears just from tasting it."
The sorcerer blinked a couple of times after hearing words like membrane and squirt, then twisted the cap off the tube and removed the foil membrane. Finally, he raised the tube with enthusiasm, opened his mouth wide, and sent a stream of viscous, colorless sludge into it. Noctis closed his mouth, chewed a couple of times, then froze. Slowly his face changed, becoming pale and almost panicked. He glanced at Sunny with wide eyes, shuddered, then slowly chewed some more, and swallowed with visible effort. Sunny continued to stare at him.
"Remarkable, isn't it?"
The immortal transcendent shivered, then forced out a weak smile.
"That is an unforgettable flavor indeed. Truly a dish worthy of being eaten by those following the god of death. Thank you very much, Sunless. I've been really enlightened."
Sunny grinned.
"Don't be shy then, eat some more."
Noctis dropped the tube on the table and energetically shook his head.
No, sadly I am very full. Thanks for the offer, though."
He reached out with a trembling hand and grabbed his glass, then gulped down all of the wine in one go. Sunny sipped his tea with a satisfied expression. "Serves you right, bastard." The sorcerer poured himself some more wine, glanced at the tube of synth paste with unrestrained horror, and then furtively moved it further away from himself. Finally, he looked at Sunny and lingered for a few moments. Then, the immortal asked,
"So, Sunless, now that we had a splendid and unforgettable, breakfast, are you going to tell me where the glass knife is?
Sunny hesitated for a bit, then answered with a measured thought.
I need to know a few things first, though.
Noctis sighed with disappointment, then reluctantly shrugged.
Knowing things is very overrated if you ask me, but I understand. Creatures of shadow are known to be drawn to mysteries after all. What is it that you are curious about?
Sunny slowly inhaled, thinking. There were many things he wanted to learn, but the most important of them was rather simple. It carried the most weight for his plans and his future. Was Noctis really capable of defeating the other immortals and breaking hope's chains? It certainly didn't seem so. As far as chain lords went, the sorcerer was not the most fearsome and terrifying. In fact, his whole persona and attitude made him look rather harmless. Sunny knew, of course, that it was just a mask and that there was vast and dreadful power hiding beneath it. But would that power be enough to challenge the likes of Solving or the rulers of the Ivory City? Both factions had armies, countless awakened, and enough resources to wage a war for centuries, while Noctis only had himself and a few sailor dolls. So was his desire to unleash hell upon the shattered kingdom just madness? Or did he have a solid reason to be confident that there was at least a chance of victory? Sunny was going to make a decision on whether or not to join the sorcerer in this insane endeavor. After all, so knowing the answer was of utmost importance. His life depended on it. He hesitated and then said, or rather thought,
How many knives do you already possess?
Noctis smiled radiantly, then answered in a carefree tone. His answer, however, was not at all what Sunny hoped and expected to hear.
What do you mean I don't have any?
Sunny's face twitched, and the porcelain cup suddenly exploded in his hand. He was too shocked to pay it any attention, though.
What? How can you not have a single knife? You have to have the one entrusted to you at least.
The sorcerer waved a hand.
Oh, I used to have one, true, but it is sort of, well, things happened and now I don't have it anymore.
Sunny stared at the immortal transcendent with a stunned expression. He was so befuddled that he even forgot to remove his hand from the emerald amulet.
This guy can't be that insane, right? How is he going to wage war against all of the Kingdom of Hope if he doesn't even have a single knife? I have more of them than he does, goddammit.
Noctis laughed.
So fierce, so straightforward. But don't worry about it, Sunless.
He remained silent for a few moments, drinking his wine, and then sighed.
You see, in the beginning there were 7 knives entrusted to the 7 of us to hold the fate of another in their hands. The iron knife, the wooden knife, the ember knife, the glass knife, the ivory knife, the obsidian knife, and the ruby knife.
The sorcerer stared into the distance, as if remembering the past. A dark expression appeared on his face.
The iron knife was used and destroyed, and so was the ember knife, so only 5 remain. However, through coincidence or maybe fate, none of the chain lords now possess one except for Solving, who wields her own fate and not that of the other.
He smiled.
You see, the shadow hid the glass knife before his death. No one knows where it is. The obsidian knife had been entrusted to the one in the north, but she lost it to me in a game of wit.
Sunny growled.
Wait, didn't you lose that one too? How the hell did you manage to lose 2 of the damned knives?
Noctis giggled.
Oh, actually I lost 3. I had the ivory knife too at some point.
Sunny groaned, then grabbed his head.
What is wrong with you? Why is all of this so confusing?
The sorcerer remained silent, smiling politely. Finally, he sighed.
Oh, you are right. It is very convoluted, I guess, for someone who hasn't been living it all for centuries. So, let me start at the beginning and explain to you the fate of each of the knives. Then, you will understand why I dare to challenge all the other chain lords and how I hope to defeat them.
Sunny grimaced, then nodded dejectedly. Noctis poured himself more wine, remained silent for a few moments, and then spoke.
The glass knife is the most simple to trace.
Sitting on a plush cushion with a glass of fine wine in his hand, Noctis recounted the fates of the 7 divine knives.
The iron knife was destroyed when Lady Ader was murdered, and the ember knife was stolen and destroyed when the shadow took his own life. Of the remaining 5 knives, the glass knife is the most simple to trace. It belonged to the shadow, and now it is where the shadow had hidden it.
He paused and then continued.
The ruby knife, that one was entrusted to me some time ago. Well, I was a bit concerned about my state of mind. Hope's madness is very insidious, sunless, and not even someone like me is immune to it. So frightened of what I might do, I gave it to a dear friend of sorts for safekeeping. Which means that you and I know the location of 2 knives already.
The sorcerer sipped his wine and frowned.
Then there is the obsidian knife, which I won from the one in the north in a game of wit. The others weren't happy at all that I possessed 2 knives, so I placed it on the altar in my sanctuary and proclaimed that everyone who manages to gather enough of my coins can take it.
A heavy sigh escaped from Sonny's lips.
Oh, you did what?
What was wrong with that guy? It was a relic created by Sun God they were talking about, the key to an immortal's death. Why would he just put it where everyone could see it and even put a price tag on it? What madness was this?
Listen, those coins are very precious, I'll let you know. Who could have thought that someone would actually be crazy enough to collect them all? Someone did, a very determined and reckless young man, in fact. That daredevil took the knife and disappeared. He was probably killed for it, but where and how no one knows. The obsidian knife was lost, but as I said, these knives never remain lost for long, and here you are, sunless, wielding it, so.
The sorcerer raised a hand and showed Sonny 3 elegant fingers.
That is 3, the next one is the most curious, the ivory knife. It was entrusted to Severs, the Sun Lord, who gave it to his twin brother, the Sun Prince, and that is where things get strange. The Sun Prince came to me one day with an unusual request. You see, he had hidden the ivory knife and wanted for me to erase the memories of where from his mind. He also wanted me to make him forget that request.
Sonny shuddered.
He destroyed those memories on purpose, even before the terrible torture.
Noctis sighed.
While my aspect has to do with souls, I was very close to Ader, the priestess of Heart God, before she was killed by Solving, that cursed murderer, so I inherited a few things and a lot of knowledge from her. That was why the Sun Prince came to me, although I still don't know what his motive was. Regardless, I agreed to help him and remove the memory of the ivory knife's secret location from his mind. However,
the sorcerer smiled.
I did not just destroy it. That would be too boring, don't you think? Instead, I kept the memory for myself and eventually retrieved the ivory knife.
Sonny shook his head.
So where is it? How did you manage to lose that one too?
The immortal transcendent shrugged.
Well, the one in the north was still angry with me and wanted a rematch. The stakes were high, and that time, sadly, I didn't win. She got the ivory knife and then threw it into the sky below. That was very silly of her. It is impossible to really lose one of the knives forever, so it was bound to return one day, and recently it did. I don't know where it is, but it is back, that is for sure.
Sonny looked at him for a while, a somber expression on his face. He was pretty certain that he knew who had the ivory knife, Mordred, the Prince of Nothing, and if that fiend wielded it, even gods would not be able to predict what was going to happen. Noctis, however, didn't seem concerned. He sipped his wine with a smile.
No matter where it is, it will turn up soon enough, so the only knife that remains is the wooden knife, which is in Solving's possession. This one is the simplest to get, although not the easiest. The murderous witch, you know, is more than ready to give it to anyone whom she deems worthy enough to try and kill her, so we don't even need to search for it. Sooner or later, it will fall into our hands all by itself.
Sonny remained silent for a bit, then said in a somber tone.
So let me get this straight. There are 5 knives. The obsidian knife is in my possession, and the glass knife is hidden in a place that is only known to me. The ruby knife is hidden in a place only known to you. The wooden knife will be given to us by Solving if we defeat her. And the ivory knife is somewhere out there, being pulled toward all this mess by fate.
The sorcerer nodded with a smile.
Indeed, so you see. While I do not possess any of the knives yet, getting 3 out of the 5 would not be too difficult, and the 4th one will naturally appear on my path, 4 out of 5. It doesn't look that crazy anymore, don't you think?
Sonny hesitated. Yes, it only looked very crazy instead of utterly crazy now. But all he needed was to know that there was a chance of victory, and now it seemed that there was. Noctis, eccentric and unreliable as he seemed, had not made the decision based on nothing. The sorcerer glanced at him and raised an eyebrow.
So, Sunless, are you going to share the location of the glass knife with me and help me free Hope? Shall we break her chains and free this land and ourselves of a fate worse than death? What do you think?
Sonny sighed. That was a very troublesome question, and completely inescapable at that. However, he could not answer it yet. Looking at the immortal sorcerer, he said,
I can't make that decision alone. I need to discuss it with my friends first.
Noctis blinked.
Oh, well, why not? It is always good to have loyal friends. Where are they?
Sonny shifted slightly.
That I don't know.
The sorcerer scratched the back of his head with a perplexed expression.
I guess we'll have to find them first, then tell me what are their names.
Sonny looked away, then cleared his throat awkwardly.
I don't know that either.
Who knew what names the members of the cohort received in the nightmare? Noctis stared at him for a few moments, then asked in an even tone.
You don't know the names of your friends? How interesting. Well, how do they look then?
Sonny smiled sheepishly. Or rather, he tried. With his bestial face and sharp fangs, the result was far from being as innocent and apologetic as he would have wanted it to be.
Actually, I don't know how they look either.
The immortal transcendent slowly took a sip of wine, remained silent for a bit, then spoke.
So, if I understood correctly, you won't tell me about the glass knife until you have consulted with your friends, but you don't know where they are, what their names are, and how they look. Did I get it all?
Sonny shifted awkwardly, then shrugged.
Yes, but they were supposed to leave me clues of their whereabouts on the Iron Hand Island. That's something, right?
Noctis emptied his glass and looked at him with a strange smile.
Sunless, how do I say this? There is no island by that name in the Kingdom of Hope.
Oh, right. The Iron Giant might have been still alive and in possession of both of his arms, so there would not be an Iron Hand Island. Indeed. Sonny shook his head.
You just know it by another name. It does exist, don't worry. Actually, it is right here near the sanctuary, so I will have to go there first before giving you an answer.
Noctis looked at him, blinked a couple of times, and then sighed.
All right, then. In that case, wait for a week or 2 before your new heart settles. Traveling before that would be very unwise, but after that, do go and find your friends. Invite them here, actually. I doubt that there's a friend of yours who is better, smarter, and more beautiful than I, but I'm sure that they are all nice people, or demons, or whatever they are.
He smiled, and then winked at Sonny with a slightly mischievous look.
I can't wait to meet them.